of the Washington County Board of Education. This time, I'll call the meeting to order and declare a quorum. We have all members present this evening, along with our student member. At this time, I invite you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll have approval of this evening's agenda. Is there a motion?
Move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Pickford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the agenda for this evening? Okay, we have 7 affirmatives. Student member concurs. Motion carries. This time we'll have approval of the minutes.
Mrs. Williams, I have 3 motions tonight. The first one will be to approve the work session minutes dated Tuesday, February 1st, 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Gaspard. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Zentmeyer. Is there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the work session dated February 1st, 2002? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval? All right, we have 7 affirmative votes. Student member concurs.
Mrs. Williams, I move for the second motion for the approval of the closed session minutes dated Tuesday, February 1st, 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Gaspard. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Are there any additions or corrections to the February 1st closed session minutes? All those in favor of approval? We have 7 affirmative votes.
And the final motion on the approval of the business meeting minutes dated Tuesday, February the 1st, 2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Guest. Are there any additions or corrections to the business meeting minutes of February 1st, 2022? All right, then we'll move to the vote. All right, thank you. We have 7 affirmatives. Student member concurs, so we have 3 approved sets of minutes. Thank you. All right, we'll move to the public comment portion of our meeting. Before we open the floor for public comment, I'd like to read from Board Policy KD regarding procedures at business meetings. Each person wishing to address the Board of Education is encouraged but not required to sign up prior to the meeting and may address any topic concerning Washington County Public Schools except personnel or student matters which clearly identify an individual or individuals. Each speaker may speak for up to 5 minutes. And Mr. Bickford is our timer. Mr. Bickford, would you like to explain how your timing works?
When it's yellow, it means you have about 30 seconds left, and then when it's red, if you could wrap up.
Okay. At this time, we'll have Ms. Dominique Warner Odami come forward. She's the first person who's signed up in advance. Mrs. Odami? Okay, doesn't appear to be here, so we'll move that to Mr. Neil Becker.
Good evening, President Williams, board members, Dr. Michael and staff. Thanks for the opportunity to address you this evening. As I have in recent meetings, tonight again, I'm going to talk about the budget. I know it's a big part of this evening's agenda. And the budget is a topic that deserves the attention of every educator, student, and the family of students enrolled in Washington County Public Schools. Your efforts to finalize a budget, I know you're working on it, and it was crafted by WCPS staff. Your efforts are to be lauded. The budget is not filled with fluff or fat or pork or other trite expressions used by those who continue to underfund WCPS. In fact, this budget is too lean. It should include more staff, including school counselors, social workers, and other specialists to meet the needs of the students and the staff. Remember, in Washington County Public Schools, every student who walks through the door immediately becomes part of that school family and part of that school community, and they're embraced as such. The budget should include funding for community schools, as we heard last meeting, which, when properly implemented, provide wraparound services for students and their families. The commissioners should be funding WCPS in a manner that demonstrates their value of Washington County Public Schools and public education in general. The educators who make it work, the students enrolled. The budget you have created, that you have in your hands, barely breaks the ice to meet the needs of staff and students. And the commissioners are likely to underfund it yet again and will be labeled low effort again. Instead of investing in public education by fully funding the budget and capital improvement, the commissioners only meet the legal minimum, the bare legal minimum. It's called maintenance of effort, and that's only after being fined by the state of Maryland. Submit a budget to the commissioners that reflects the needs of WCPS. I know you're considering it. More school counselors and social workers, more specialists to meet the needs of all students, more enrichment programs, improved and enhanced wraparound services, appropriately staffed welcome centers for our students newest to the community. Let the commissioners pick up the cost of the school resource officers, as county governments do in all but 2 counties. Those dollars should be used for educational matters. SROs are important to our communities. They're vital. But SROs must be part of the county's public safety budget, not our general fund budget. Our budget puts the educational matters first. Public safety is the county's budget. Put a budget on their desk that reflects the actual educational needs. As I've said for years, it costs less to educate than to rehabilitate. Not too long ago, Washington County government covered nearly 70% of the cost of public education in the county. Over the years, that number has eroded to approximately 50%, and the county leans on the state to pick up more and more, leaving the county funding to the bare minimum. The commissioners entrust the Board of Education, elected officials, to run the school system, to create a budget that the school system needs. And then they fund it at the bare minimum. The commissioners entrust you. They must fund it. If the commissioners refuse to fully fund the budget, let them explain to the educators, a ton of them in this room, and the students that public education is not their priority. The commissioners must do better.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Beth Forrest.
Good evening, President Williams, Vice President Stauffer, elected board members, Dr. Michael, and my fellow staff members. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I do appreciate your willingness to listen. My name is Beth Forrest, and I am a first grade teacher at Smithsburg Elementary. This is my 23rd year teaching. Over these years, I've met many amazing educators, both at my school and throughout the county. I have always loved my job and find it very rewarding especially watching the light bulb go on to students who have struggled. I firmly believe that every student can learn and succeed. I also believe that every student in Washington County Public Schools and every other school district in our world deserves a teacher that believes in them. We have great things happening at Smithsburg Elementary. Students have returned to the classrooms and are learning or relearning the ins and outs of traditional education that have been forgotten over the last 2 years. The deficits felt everywhere from COVID-19 have also been felt at Smithsburg Elementary. The teachers, paraprofessionals, and other support staff are working very hard to reach every student and close these gaps. Students are taking ownership of their work and working hard to expand their knowledge. We do have some challenges, though. With no assistant principal in our building, the lead teacher, special education case manager, and counselor are often called on to help out when behavior issues or when we're lacking substitutes, which we all know happens a lot this year. This causes strain in our ability of our students to receive the services that they are entitled to and rightfully deserve. We have been asked to close the gaps, but it is increasingly difficult to do so when we have class sizes of 25 and 26 with little additional personnel to offer support. Having taught classes that had 17 students and now having 23 students, I can say firsthand that the smaller class size allows for more one-on-one attention in addition to the ability to meet with every student in a small group more frequently. At our school, most grades are 2-round with an average of 26 students per class. We were told yesterday that it's projected that we are set to lose another position at Smithsburg Elementary next year. The classes currently that are 3-round, if they were changed to 2-round, would have 28 to 30 in each class. The loss of another position would be detrimental to the success of students at Smithsburg Elementary. Finally, I'd like to speak to one matter that I find very alarming and that needs to be addressed before we have a major problem on our hands: morale. After talking with many different WCPS employees who work at various locations, it has become clear to me that staff throughout our county are feeling overworked, underappreciated, and pushed to the limit. Teachers are burning out at a rate beyond anything I've seen, and truthfully, it's scary. I know of many who are currently actively searching for other employment opportunities, saying that they cannot maintain the current expectations. These include teachers who have many years of experience, who thought they'd teach forever, as well as teachers who are in their first 5 years of teaching. We cannot afford to lose the expertise and knowledge that these fine educators bring to our county. While we appreciate the 2-hour early dismissal days that were added to the schedule, as they have given us some additional time, teachers are still unable to complete their expected workload within the school day. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that it needs to be looked into and changes need to be made. In conclusion, I'd like to invite any of the elected board members that would be interested to spend the day with me in my classroom, to see our hardworking students in action, and to see the everyday struggles such as large class sizes in primary classrooms, learning deficits due to COVID, and having a limited number of support staff available to support the students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Carr. That's the last name I have on the list. Is there anyone else? Okay, back to her.
Good evening. My name's John Fetchin, and I'm in my 21st year of teaching at Smithsburg High School. It's been a great experience to get to know students and community and to help young folks learn about history, government, economics, and physics. I want to talk to you about planning time. A few years ago, Smithsburg High School became the envy of Washington County because we went to a 7-period day with 2 planning periods. And I want to thank Dr. Gary Willow, our former principal who implemented this policy, and my current principal, Mr. Chris Klein, for continuing it. 2 of the 10 periods each week are taken up for professional development and collaboration purposes. And the other 8 are for our own discretion. I used to truly resent the time it was taken for professional development when we were overworked. And I don't feel that resentment anymore because we actually have more time than most schools in the county. When this was first implemented, I used the additional time to assign more grading-intensive assignments like essays and other writing assignments. When I grade an essay, I read it very carefully and make a lot of comments and give my students a chance to redo the essay for a higher grade if they choose to, because I'm a pretty hard grader. With my comments, they're able to make major improvements in their writing, and I see definite progress over the course of a year. The downside of this approach is I grade about 4 to 5 essays per hour, and I currently have 130 students. So it takes about 30 hours. If I assign an essay to all my students, it takes about 30 hours just to grade them all the first time, and then I have to regrade many of them. So even though I try to limit the amount of time, I try to use my time as efficiently as possible at school, I still wind up taking quite a lot of work home with me. And I knew this was part of the job when I signed up for it. I understand that when I became a teacher, all right? Now, however, I do believe in having a work-life balance, and there are limits to the amount of time that I'm willing to put in outside my contract day. And I would love to assign more essays to my students, but with these large class sizes and limited planning time, I can only do about 3 or 4 of these essays per year. And my point that I'm trying to make here is that extra planning time, for me at least, means a more rigorous experience for my students with more feedback and an overall greater opportunity for them to learn the skills they're going to use in life. The early dismissals are helpful, and we appreciate it. 2 hours a month is greatly appreciated. It's just not enough. So I'd like to propose an idea that I think will give us more time to work and while relieving parents of the burden of having those early dismissals and providing students with an opportunity to engage in activities that interest them. So I would love to see an activity day every Friday for 2 hours in every school. Every school, all right? Half the teachers could run the activities, while half the teachers get 2 hours of planning time, and that would mean 2 hours every other week instead of once a month. And students could go to assemblies, go to meetings, get extra help with homework, attend clubs or other activities. And that has the potential to be a great opportunity for teachers to get caught up. It's good for parents who don't have to arrange childcare. You won't get all the angry phone calls and emails from parents who don't want to have to come home early from work for their kids. And it's also good for students who are, I don't know how to put it. I think they're almost emotionally stunted this year after COVID. It can't get them to go to clubs. I can't get them to do anything after school. They're just, I think we were still healing from COVID. And so I think it'll give them a chance to do something fun and productive with their time at school. So I just wanted to give a suggestion I thought would be helpful. So I ask that you please consider that idea when you go forward with your plans to help improve Washington County. Thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Fetchman. I saw some people enter, and we'll go back to the first person that we have signed up on the list, and that's Ms. O'Dami. Is Ms. O'Dami here? No? Okay, then we will continue with the next person who would like to speak. Good evening.
My name's Ashley McCusker. So, Washington County parents on notice. Kids must attend regularly. That was from, I believe, today's newspaper.
Ashley, could you speak into the mic a little bit?
Sorry. Can you hear me better?
Yeah, better, thank you.
Did you hear the first part?
Yes.
Okay.
There, yeah.
All right. Are you serious right now? This would be laughable if it weren't such a slap in the face. Do you sit up there and really wonder why the attendance is the way it is? If so, it shows exactly how out of touch you are with the people you are supposed to represent. I will tell you why this is happening. It is happening because of the terrible COVID protocols you have in place. You tell parents they are not supposed to send their kids to school if they have symptoms of COVID. Let's go over the symptoms. headache, sore throat, runny nose, upset stomach, and more. How many other illnesses fit that or all of those symptoms? How many children have seasonal allergies? Now, as a parent, your options are this. You can either send your kid to school that day and have them sent home and have to be tested to come back, or you can keep your kid home and hope that tomorrow they wake up with no issues. Guess which option parents are choosing? I know many parents that refuse to have their children tested. It makes sense to me. Have you ever had a COVID test done? I've had several, and let me tell you, they are not comfortable at all. Now you are taking these children who are already afraid of everything at this point, thanks to you, and saying if you want to go back to school, you have to have this very uncomfortable test done. How many of you have children and have taken them to get this test done? Maybe one of you? You aren't the one holding your children down while someone shoves something up their nose, only to have to do it how many more times throughout the year to prove you're okay to come to school? Do you ever stop to think about what's going on with your children, with our children, mentally? Also, have you ever tried getting your children checked out at the pediatric office lately? Let me tell you how it goes. A few months back, my husband wasn't feeling good and went to the doctors to get a strep test. They did the strep test and it came back positive, but they said they also wanted to do a COVID test just to be safe. Our kids were having the same symptoms. We called to set up an appointment and get them checked for strep. You know what they told us? Because my husband had a COVID test with no results yet, they would not see our children. They said we could send them to urgent care or wait until my husband's test results came back, and if they were negative, then we could set up an appointment. COVID has made it to where healthcare providers won't even see our sick children. So if you're having issues with parents getting your doctor's notes and writing their own, this is why. It is easier for us as parents to keep our kids home for a day or so than to be forced to quarantine for 10 days, because that's what happens if you decide against giving your child a COVID test after they have been sent home with a symptom. So if you're one of the parents, and I know many, who refuse to test their children, you're making a decision based on the least amount of time off of work and school. Time off work equals money, and parents can't afford that once, let alone multiple times. This is what's going on with your numbers. You have your base numbers of parents who really don't change from year to year, of who maybe don't care about their children's attendance. The inflated numbers is a direct reflection of policies you have in place. So if you would like those numbers to come down, I suggest looking at the people sitting around you, not at us. Now onto the bigger issue I have with this article. The amount of hypocrisy in this article is outstanding. Let me read you a quote. Daily attendance is essential to better academic performance, greater work opportunities, higher education opportunities, better student outcomes, and support social emotional development. Do I need to read that again for you guys? We have agreed with this from the beginning of the pandemic. We have been the ones coming here saying it to you. All of last year, when we were one of the last states to get away from virtual learning, where was this? All of this year, when we're asking to do away with the quarantining of our healthy students, where was this? I wrote emails to the health department and asked you for proof that this quarantine strategy is working. The answer I got was that no one even tracks this data. You are responsible for the poor test grades. You are responsible for attendance going down. You. Yet it's never you. Every time we write our concerns, all you do is push the blame to someone else. It's the state board's fault, it's the health department's fault, and now it's our fault. No, it's not. You guys need to grow a backbone and make protocols that make sense no matter what anyone says. As far as the quarantine goes, I have an email from Dr. Michaels saying he is able to change the rules for quarantine because it falls under operational. Okay, we'll change it then. Do away with it. And if you tell me you have, then you need to answer to the parents whose schools continue to send kids home to quarantine and do something to make sure schools are following the new protocol. You can also do something about the masking too, you just choose not to. My advice is to get in contact with Carroll County Board of Education to see what real leadership looks like, because this isn't it.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Good evening, I'm Ethan Lowen. 7 months ago, the parents came to the school board and spoke about the extreme damage that the school's policies were causing to their children. And I have regularly discussed the research behind the parents' points. One such study is a quarterly report that the American Academy of Actuaries issues about how many more people have died from non-COVID causes since the lockdowns began. For example, auto accident deaths have increased by 8% and overdose deaths have ballooned by 32% since the lockdown started. Essentially, they are trying to determine how many people have died because of government mandates. The result is that non-COVID-related deaths have increased by 3% since the government mandates began, which comes to 212,000 additional deaths. The next question is this: while 212,000 people may have died from mandates, how many lives have they saved? Well, the first time I spoke before this board, I discussed that Florida, which had the least COVID restrictions in the country, was the 25th state for the least number of COVID deaths per 100,000 people, which is exactly average, whereas California, with the harshest and longest running lockdowns, was 23rd for the least number of COVID deaths for 100,000 people. That's a dramatic loss to Californians' quality of life for it to result in an almost zero difference. Therefore, Johns Hopkins decided to take on that question, and they analyzed that study along with 18,000 plus other studies about the first wave of COVID. And 13 days ago, it published a historic study, and they determined that government mandates reduced deaths by 0.2%, which comes to 1,797 lives saved. It's important to point out that this study wasn't about the effects of social distancing or staying at home when you're sick, getting tested for COVID, etc. Practicing universal health precautions saved hundreds of thousands of lives, but those behaviors increased once COVID arrived. What Johns Hopkins measured is what was the benefit to governments creating a criminal consequence to get people to live even more restricted lives than what we had already started doing naturally. And the answer is those actions reduced deaths by 0.2%. Let's let that sink in. Government mandates reduced deaths from COVID by 1,797 people, but in so doing, they increased deaths from every other cause by as many as 212,000 people. In other words, when parents came into this room 7 months ago and said that the school's policies are causing incredible harm with no benefit, it is now the official position of our nation's preeminent medical institution as well. And most damning of all, the majority of the studies were published before August of 2 years ago. That is how long politicians and policy advisors and health departments have known this and still pushed government mandates. This study puts a glaring spotlight on that fact. The governors of the lockdown-free states were not guessing about the effects that people living according to their personal choices was going to have. They knew exactly what the impact would be because the science told them. Just as I haven't been guessing for the last 7 months because I also read the science. And the lockdown politicians knew everything that the rest of us knew, which brings us to the conclusion of the Johns Hopkins study. Their final analysis is that the only quantifiable results of government mandates were reduced economic activity, reduced schooling, increased social unrest, and a weakening of the measurements of our democratic functions. In other words, there's been a lot of suffering and a lot of loss of our rights and freedoms. And that's it. There were no medical benefits significant enough to appear in the study's conclusions. And within a week of that study, we began seeing lockdown politicians change their tune about mandates. The science has changed. It's a phrase that lockdown politicians have simultaneously started saying a lot over the last 2 weeks. Well, the science has not changed. And they knew that their policies were not affecting the path of the pandemic before, and they know that changing to be closer to what the lockdown-free states have always remained won't have an effect on the results from now on either. In regards to the implications this has for this school board, we need to be practical. None of the people who did this to our schools care about our children any more today than they did 2 years ago when those studies about the ineffectiveness of lockdowns first came out. And those same people don't care about any of us anymore today than they have for the last 2 years, as they've known that the only thing their mandates were doing was increasing the chances of you or me or any of us dying from anything and everything else. The question is, what will you do? Will you join the other school board who filed a lawsuit to defend the children? If the students begin to take back their constitutional rights and come to school without masks, will you expel them like the school district to the southeast of us has done to their students? What will you do? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowen. Is there anyone else who'd like to come forward? Yes, ma'am. Hello.
My name is Erica, and this is Danielle. We are the owners of Tribe Called Pressed Juice Bar, downtown 41 South Potomac Street. So we had a couple of things.
Tell us what your last names are, please.
My name is Danielle Casanal.
And
Casanel?
Erica Bell.
Bell.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we came up with an idea to a scholarship that will be issued through our juice bar to help seniors in Washington County. We have a chalkboard wall in our juice bar that displays kind of like who we are, and a student from Barbara Ingram's did the chalkboard wall for us. We want to, give it a clean slate and offer a senior the ability to redo the wall. They would have to submit an application and do an essay. Basically, the essay is just who they are, their aspirations and dreams, and also submit a piece of artwork. And if selected, right now, my goal was $500. We've already exceeded that from a couple nonprofits and a couple businesses downtown. We want to get to 1,500, which doesn't seem too far-fetched. And we want to be able to award a Washington County senior with that grant, with that scholarship.
If I could just take a moment and read the letter that we gave you guys so everyone out here can see. It says, "Dear valued community member, Tribe Code Press Juice Bar is located in the Arts and Entertainment District of downtown Hagerstown. We take pride in serving our community and want to demonstrate that by formulating a scholarship to serve a Washington County High School senior. This scholarship will provide not only financial support, but an opportunity to design and display their artwork on our chalkboard wall in our shop. The scholarship will be targeted for a senior enrolled in Washington County school system with a GPA of 3.0, planning to attend a community college, four-year college, or trade school in the fall of 2022. Interested students will be required to submit an application along with a short essay of who they are, including their goals and aspirations. Along with the application, we will ask for a sample of their art displaying who they believe Tribe is. Tribe Code Press Juice Bar hopes that you or your company would consider donating to this scholarship, a scholarship that we plan on having each school year, and in turn, we would include the name of your organization when the winner is announced. With the donations, we're sure to achieve this year's fundraising goal and begin to serve the seniors of Washington County immediately. If you're interested in partnering with us, please let us know by emailing tribecodepress@gmail.com or call 301-991-0414, and we are looking forward to collaborating with you. One of the, I'm sorry, I don't know if it was a teacher or a parent, but was talking about morale. And this is something that we think would bring morale back. We are in the Arts and Entertainment District, and I think that sometimes that gets lost. The students that are into arts and entertainment, it gets lost with, all the other things that you can do in school. And we're just looking for some support from the Board of Education for this as well.
I would also like to add, if you've heard of our juice bar, we're not your average juice bar. So that's why we want to bring more to the city of Hagerstown and downtown area. So we work very closely with the Barbara Ingram School just because we're right up the street. So we always see a lot of them kids, and we want to bring more of the other high schools, South High, North High, Smithsburg High, all the Washington County schools. We've also hosted events called Higher Learning, to where we try to educate people just on financial literacy, cryptocurrency, insurances, just about entrepreneurship, and we want to continue that. So Danielle read the letter. We just want to make sure the Board of Education is on our side, and if we post anything, whether it be on social media or, do a flyer, we just want to make sure we have your permission to say Board of Education on it. We don't want to say it unless we have the total approval of you guys. Also, with that being said, in our juice bar, we have, if any of you ever heard of, we have a room that is dedicated to our aponic. Oh, sorry. 30 seconds?
Yep.
Okay. We have a aponic area, which is the ability to grow food without the use of soil. So that's how we will grow our produce, like our kale and spinach and all that good stuff. So I don't want to see see my 30 seconds.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have another copy, or Dr. Pugh is in the back. She's one of our assistant superintendents, and she will see that someone who is in student services gets this, so that this information can be sent to the high
Thank you
school.
guys so
Maybe
much.
she could print some more off, so we all could have them,
Yeah.
because they were short.
Is there anyone else else that would like to come forward? Okay. All right, at this time, we'll have board member response to public comment. Colleagues, any response?
Yeah, I'll just say real quick, unfortunately, they skipped out real quick before I had a chance to thank them. I wish more businesses were like that, taking an active approach in the community. There certainly are quite a few of them that do that, but for them to do that with a relatively new business, I certainly appreciate that, and I hope that gets a lot more traction than what it currently has.
Thank you. Here, here, yes. Okay, if there's nothing further with regard to board member response to public comment, we'll go ahead and move to old business. Our first item of consideration under old business is the board's fiscal year 2023 draft budget. We have Mr. Prue, our Chief Operating Officer, Mr. David Brandenburg, our Executive Director of Finance, and Mr. Eric Sisler, our Budget and Finance Manager. So at this time, we have an opportunity for board members to discuss any potential revisions to the draft general fund budget, or to ask questions. Mr. Bickford?
I have a question. I tend to agree with, I think I stated this during the work session, and Mr. Becker made comments about that the county commissioners currently are not funding SROs. We fund our SROs. And so I was prepared to make an amendment tonight. However, we are waiting for updated numbers from the state. And so I feel awkward talking about amending a budget when we don't know all of the money that's coming. Can you give an update on that, or?
Yeah, we received information from the state that our county allocation might be changing. The required county allocation might be changing. We've asked to have that confirmed. Unfortunately, the state cannot provide us any information until Friday. And the team before you has got a scheduled meeting to meet with state representatives. They'll go down through our county budget and make sure that we have the accurate number for the county allocation as required by law. So we'd like to confirm that number. As we confirm that number, we can better inform the board of your financial resources and other decisions that you might want to make.
Is there, we know there's a few updated numbers. Can you bring us up to speed on, we have Meritus is one that we're going to need extra
Right,
funding for?
Yes, since I last presented the budget, we've been working with Meritus. We have not reached agreement with them. They're the contractor for our nursing services. We do anticipate that it will require an additional $300,000 in the budget to support the increase in nursing services, a combination of salary and potentially additional professional development days, some things, again, we need to work out with Meritus. So there'll be a need to add approximately $300,000 to the draft budget that I presented or make other adjustments in the budget. Also, we're going to make a change in one of the IA positions that we have in the counseling department. We had a retirement in January, and I'd like to make a recommendation that we change that IA position to help support counseling, and we might be able to expand 2 part-time counseling positions into 2 full-time counseling positions as a result of making that adjustment. So staff would like to bring those ideas forward to the board either tonight or at a future meeting.
Yes, I'm fine if we want to wait, since we do have a meeting on the 1st, but that's, President William, that's also our budget hearing, correct?
Correct.
So is it okay to make amendments and then have a hearing about it, or at the March, to wait until we get updated state numbers?
Mr. Prue, would you like to weigh in on that? Perhaps you
Absolutely.
had
I think, you know, when we think about the scope of some potential changes that you have in front of you, you're talking about probably less than, you know, 1/10% of your entire budget. So to still entertain a hearing and hear from the community on your budget on March 1, considering that you may make amendments that night if we can firm up the numbers from the state, I don't think that would be out of line. I know there was one train of thought that says, let's finalize, let's get where we know we are, we're not making any more changes, then hear from the community. But in this case, I think, the vast majority of your budget's not going to change. You're 99% or greater sure of what's going to happen when you're within your budget. And I think it's still sort of incumbent on the community to come and tell you what they think of your budget. And you could hear something that night that may change your mind to other amendments. That's always a possibility after a hearing. So I think we shouldn't look at the hearing as it's the end-all, be-all of what final decisions we may make, because you may hear something at the hearing that causes you pause and reflection to change the budget before you approve it. You could choose, after making an amendment on the 1st, hearing from the community, you're currently scheduled for an approval on the 15th. You could push that back.
Okay. That's fine.
So, at the last board meeting, I advocated for a few items. Basically, my concerns was the class sizes, and our learning gap is large, and truancy is an issue. So I would only add that if there's any possible way, and if there's anything that's added to the money to the budget, that we look at those areas of need. Again, I'm not an educator, I've not been in the classroom, but my common sense tells me that we need to have more hands in the classrooms to help, to make the class sizes smaller. Maybe you have team teaching so that we can get these students' grade levels up and the learning gap smaller, and that we have the people for the, I guess it's the counselors or whoever goes out and does the kids that are truant, to find these and get these back into the schools. I just think that we can't do enough with this pandemic that we've had. It's just been horrible. We see it every day in the classroom. The kids are depressed. They're not loved like they should be, and we need to get back to that. And I think there's where we need more hands on deck. So I'm just advocating for more parapros and more teachers in the classrooms.
Mr. Stauffer?
I agree with Mr. Bickford. I'd just like to wait to see what the final numbers are from the state, the figures, and then we can perhaps then address some of Mr. Gessford's concerns and so forth. But I would also add that fact that everybody here would like, I think, sitting on this board, would like to see more help for classroom teachers, parapros. But in my visits to schools, one of the things I hear, even from the teachers, is, but we realize there aren't bodies to fill the jobs and so forth. So I don't know how we get around that, but I'd like to wait on the final numbers to see how we can perhaps rearrange some things in the budget, if that's possible.
Yes, Mr. Evans?
Yeah, and kind of to piggyback off of Mike and kind of a lot of what the teachers were talking about as well. I said it at the public work session about the teachers in the classroom, and I certainly understand what Dr. Michael was saying about, the teachers need leadership from, their expert colleague. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but for example, the literacy coordinator. I especially after we got that great report, great presentation that showed how well they were doing. It pains me to say, but when we take a certificated teacher out of the classroom, that makes our job a little, well, not our job, that's the teacher's job, a little more difficult. So, I would like to see, try to find a way where, we move some of those teachers that, potentially are maybe working from the Board of Ed here back in the classroom. The way I see it, and obviously there's 7 of us, so the way I see it, the principals are the leaders. That's the one that provides the leadership in the school. So I would like to see the budget show that, maybe we can try to make some of those adjustments. How that happens, I don't know, because, You know, it's a lot easier said than done to add more teachers in schools that are already full. Where are you going to put a teacher at South High, you know? So I get it, it's not easy, but it is on a wish list of mine.
Mr. Gupta?
A question for Dr. Michael. Do we know if the new numbers are going to be more or less than they currently are?
What our staff does every year is we look at the funding formulas and we try to make an estimate on county numbers, and that's what we based the budget that I presented on, was our estimate. New numbers came out from the state. Right now, they're a little higher than what our estimate was, but still in the ballpark of what we have currently proposed needing to come from the county. What I've heard from staff is, you know, we're questioning the number. We're optimistic the number is correct, but there's other counties that their number went down, and they're questioning how their number went down. So we have some new people at the state. They're estimating numbers. Obviously, we have the new blueprint law that's driving how the formulas are being created. So I want to remain cautiously optimistic that the number that is slightly up is true, and that would actually help us fund the budget that I've presented so far. But we'll need to wait and see. We really need to talk to the state people. This team I have great confidence in. We can't get the math to work, but we're anxious to have somebody show us how it works, because we want to have those resources available to Washington County Public Schools.
But they're not allowed to go work for the state.
No.
Mr. Stafford?
I'd just like to say that class size has been an ongoing problem ever since I've been an educator, going back 50 years or more. And I don't know what the solution is to it. I do know that if you're going to cut class size, it seemed to me that it requires more teachers, but not just a few. It requires large numbers so that you can cut class size throughout the system, not just in a few schools. And unfortunately, some people sitting here tonight probably don't want to hear that. And I'm talking about people in the audience, people listening at home. Unfortunately, that requires funding. You got to pay the teachers. If you're going to hire them to teach the kids, you got to pay them. And so we probably aren't going to get funded to hire enough teachers ever. And so the ball bounces back here, so what do we do? So I don't know what the answer is, but that's all I'll say.
Thank you. I am on record. My remarks at the work session that we had 2 weeks ago and at the business meeting, again, I'd like to voice my support for changes in the budget to allow for us to add additional counselors, other personnel is maybe identified by staff to help our students. I think we do a great job with academic support, and I think in this time, at this time, our children need support and emotionally to deal with their social skills. I just see so much that has been exacerbated as a result of COVID. We had needs prior to COVID, and they've just been made more extreme as a result of the pandemic. And I just think this is the time to add counselors and to add those supports that are not necessarily academic, but will certainly help with giving the children the support that they need to be able to succeed academically. Anyone else? No? Okay.
Mrs. Williams, what we'll do is we'll continue to monitor the numbers, follow up on the meeting this Friday, and we may bring back suggestions to the board at the March 1st meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. This time we'll move to our second item of old business, and that is the second reading of policy JFH, policy prohibiting bullying, harassment, or intimidation.
Good evening, President Williams, members of the board, Dr. Michael. In 2009, the Maryland State Board of Education adopted a model policy prohibiting bullying, harassment, and intimidation in the schools at the direction of the Maryland General Assembly. The Washington County Board of Education proceeded to adopt its policy prohibiting bullying, harassment, and intimidation in 2009 using the state's model policy. State law requires MSBE to continuously update the model policy, and the Washington County Board of Education has updated its policy several times since its adoption in 2009 pursuant to the updates to the state model. Most recently, the Maryland State Department of Education worked with local school systems in 2021 to revise and update the state's model policy, which MSBE approved on December 7th, 2021. Washington County Board of Education must now use the revised and updated model policy to revise and update its policy on or before February 15th of 2022. The Board of Education conducted a work session on January 18th, 2022 in order to provide board members with the opportunity to review and ask questions on the state's model policy. The board members are also presented with a draft of the proposed changes to policy JFH. Following the work session, the policy committee met on January 25th, 2022 to review the proposed changes to policy JFH and to make a recommendation on moving the proposed changes to policy JFH forward to the Board of Education for a first reading. Following the Board of Education's approval of the first reading of the proposed changes on February 1st, 2022, the committee placed a public notice on board docs and the school system's website seeking comments from stakeholders on the proposed changes to the policy. The committee reviewed comments it received at its February 10th, 2022 work session. The committee is now requesting the Board of Education to approve the second reading of proposed changes to policy JFH.
Thank you, Mrs. Graham. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the second reading of proposed changes to policy JFH entitled Policy Prohibiting Bullying, Harassment, or Intimidation.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Any discussion or any questions? Mr. Gaspard?
Since our last meeting and that vote that we took, I had a question proposed to me about bullying. And so I'm going to ask this question. When we have a student that is the bully, and we have a student that's been bullied, why is it that the student who has been bullied is removed out of a class earlier so that that person can go to a class safer, when we should be removing the bully and not making the person that got bullied the person that has to leave the room first? Why is that?
Mr. Gessler, it'd be almost impossible for me to, I think it is impossible for me to respond to your question without a lot more details. I think you're talking about isolated incidents. I can't say that that's a norm one way or the other. There's a lot of different ways we handle bullying. Our goal is to eliminate the bullying behavior from students. So as we've discovered there's a bullying pattern, we work with children in different ways, including discipline, because our goal is to change behavior. But what you're describing, I can't speak to specifically.
So, but the thing is, if we're having one student that's disrupting the class and we're allowing that student to stay in there, but we're singling out the good person and letting that person go to the class, the next class, and that person's getting singled out. I thought for, equity, we wanted to make sure that everyone was treated fairly. I mean, is that really being fair to that person that's been attacked? That we pull them out and single them out so they have to go out of the classroom first? Shouldn't it be the bad kid that gets removed out of the class first and taken to that class, and so that everyone sees that as an example of, you know what, if I'm not going to behave, then I'm the person that's going to be made the example of. I mean, to me, it's just kind of backwards, and I don't know the policies and like you guys do, but to me, it just looks a little.
I think every circumstance is different. I mean, our goal is this child should not be continuing to bully other children. So that's the part that needs to be corrected, and that's the action that the team, whoever's making the decisions needs to take into account. It might be for the comfort of the child. Again, there's no way for me to respond to a specific instance, or that's a pattern of what we do in Washington County.
Mr. Stauffer?
We had a work session on this, the full board on this policy, and I posed that question, and if the response that we got at that time, if everybody will recall, because I posed that very question, was that in most cases, it's the person who does the bullying who gets switched classes. So I don't know, that was the answer from the staff member when I posed that question. So I just bring that out for consideration. I don't know if that's what the story is.
I just didn't know if we have a policy that says the first person that does it is the person that should be removed first.
There's nothing like that. Every situation is almost unique to itself.
I will say, just speaking personally as a parent who went through this experience, it was the person who was deemed to be the bully that was removed and reassigned, so.
Is there any further discussion on the policy? I appreciate the questions and the concern, but we are discussing this particular policy, and I think a lot of what is involved with your concern, Mr. Gesford, would be addressed in administrative regulations and in discipline policies and the implementation of those
Since we are
sorts
talking
of
about
things.
bullying, I thought I just wanted to have that brought out tonight.
Actually, that's actually exactly what my question was. We had an email forwarded to us from, I believe it was a parent, for the public comment on this, and, asking about, essentially the superintendent, making the regulation to implement the policy. How does that process look? If I remember correctly, I think we said that there's going to be I don't know if task force or task group, whatever is the right word to say, but we're going to get people from the school system. Is there going to be people from the community that gives input on this? How's that going to look?
I think you're referring to the policy that we had regarding the dress code, where a committee was going to be formed. It's not unusual for board policy to have a section in which the superintendent is authorized to develop administrative regulation, and that's something that the superintendent and staff do. To more specifically, this, let's see, in simplest terms, policies address the what and the why, and the superintendent will, in regulations, address the how and the when. So,
And that's also codified in state education law that the superintendent has the power and duty to write regulations also.
I do think it would be helpful. Do you want to talk about when we say promulgate, what does that mean to you?
Right, so we have a regulation on the bullying policy, so we will update the bullying regulation to align with the bullying policy of the board as the board adopts that. It's also, bullying in particular is, substantial amount of guidance is provided by the state regarding bullying, so a lot of our regulation and a lot of the policy the board has written is really aligned with the state boilerplate model. And that would be, the regulation would have to fall in that line as well.
President Williams, the only other comment I wanted to make that we brought up in the policy meeting that we wanted to announce to the public is that, while we're not making it part of the policy, we are recommending that there be an annual report specifically on bullying that addresses some of the questions that were asked by Mr. Malat and others in comments.
yes, the committee would like to see that and make that suggestion to the superintendent when regulations are looked at. So, anything else? All those in favor of approval of the second reading of proposed changes to policy JFH entitled Policy Prohibiting Bullying, Harassment, or Intimidation? All right, we have 7 affirmative votes, Student member concurs, motion carries. Okay, next we have the second reading of policy JE, student attendance.
The Policy Committee presented proposed changes to Policy JE to the Board of Education for first reading at its public business meeting on December 21st, 2021. Those changes include updating the policy format, stating the positive outcomes daily attendance can have, and setting forth the state requirement on student attendance. Following the Board of Education's approval of the first reading of the proposed changes on February 1st, 2022, the committee placed a public notice on board docs and the school system's website seeking comments from stakeholders on the proposed changes to the policy. The committee reviewed its comments it received at its public works session on February 10th, 2022. Additionally, we received one additional comment that was shared with the policy committee. The committee is now requesting the Board of Education to approve the second reading of proposed changes to policy JE.
Thank you, Mrs. Ram. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the second reading of proposed changes to policy JE entitled Student Attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Any questions, any discussion? Mr. Stauffer?
I just like to make it clear that this was an old policy that we didn't really change. We just went back through, and we're in the process of doing this with a lot of our policies, and we really don't change the content. We just make the wording clearer, but the content of this policy didn't change anything and so forth, unlike that newspaper article, which I read also, and I just shook my head at because the reporter who writes those makes it sound like we're making drastic changes in response to COVID and all that type of thing. And all we're doing is improving the language a little bit, maybe rearranging a sentence from here down to another part of the place in the policy and putting it in the proper format. This policy on student attendance, if you were to compare it to the old policy, really doesn't change a thing. Nothing.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I would just like to add that, certainly, I understand what Mr. Stauffer's saying, and, he's exactly right. I would like to add that, while some of it may be in our hands, some of it may be out of our hands, I do think that a lot of our COVID policies has, made it difficult to encourage attendance. I think, again, a lot of what is being done, whether it be at the state level or at the local level, certainly doesn't, make our job any easier here. So I've said it before, I'll say it again, that, I would like to see our kids go back to normal. And I just hope that we can do that. I think that will make our jobs and the teachers' jobs that much easier to be able to give the kids a normal life again, so.
Any other discussion? Okay, then we will move to the vote. The vote is on approving the second reading of proposed changes to policy JE entitled Student Attendance. All those in favor of approval? Okay, 7 affirmative, student member concurs. Approve that policy.
May I say something
Thank you,
before we go
Mrs.
to new
Ram.
business? I don't know if it's the proper place to say it or not.
Is it about this policy?
No. I'd just like to thank the Smithburg campus teachers and Cascade teachers. I understand we're here tonight. Some of them have left, but I didn't know where I could interject to thank them for coming.
Move to new business. Our first item of new business is the consent agenda. We have Mr. Scott Bakel, Supervisor of Purchasing, with us this evening. Good evening, Mr. Bakel.
Good evening, President Williams, Dr. Michael, members of the board. Tonight, I have 5 items for your review. These items were reviewed by our Purchasing Review Committee and are being recommended for approval, and staff is available if you have any additional questions.
Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the awards, renewals, and procurements for network switches to Skyline Technology Solutions at a cost of $784. Device repairs, iPads, MacBooks, Chromebooks, etc., renewal to iFix Your Eye Corporation and Lifeline Rescue at the unit prices listed. Mental and behavioral health providers to the various vendors at the hourly rates listed. Professional design services, automatic temperature controls replacement at North Hagerstown High School and Eastern Elementary School to Guype Associates, Inc. at a cost of $69,200. And Remind Communication and Engagement Platform to Remind 101, Inc. at a cost of $61,000.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Questions? Any discussion? Mr. Stauffer?
I'd just like to make known that $215,784, 80% of that is coming from the federal E-rate program, which is a program that, in my simple terms, superintendent can say more about it, enables schools to provide internet access and so forth and technology to schools. So 80% of that's going to be reimbursed by the E-rate. Anything you could add to that, Dr. Michael?
I think you've covered it well.
And also, I'd like a question about the mental and behavior health things. I found it interesting when I read the description of all this that the board does birth through K program services, and we have people employed at the board here who work with that, yet we don't get children until they're in pre-K at age 4. Could you explain why that is? I know it comes out of that federal program, Title IV, but could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, a portion of it comes out of Title IV, but there's also some that comes out of the general fund budget and some other grants. So we're responsible for children, particularly those identified as potentially like premature babies and things like that, children may be special needs in their future, things like that. We start working with, we have a whole team of teachers, occupational therapists, provide mental health services for students prior to them entering school. And pretty much soon after birth, we have some of our team that are working with children throughout the county. And we're required to do that regardless whether the children end up in Washington County Public Schools or private schools or homeschool. We're required by law to provide those services.
These staff members are paid out of our general fund money or out of federal money or what?
There's a combination of all types of money that help pay for this, almost out of special ed type money, but there's also, it's listed in our general fund, some of the resources we have. The services here we're trying to provide out of Title IV money.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I had a question.
Yes, Mr. Bickford.
So I've had a few teachers say that they really appreciated having access to Google Voice, mainly because it allowed them to text and communicate with parents, not using their personal numbers, I believe. And then we're replacing that with Remind, and just to be transparent, we spoke about this via email, but I wanted to speak about it publicly as well. Why did we go with Remind over Google Voice?
I might call on Joe Allen if he's still here to come forward, but Google Voice was very expensive. What I understand it does, it kind of you can use your phone, but it disguises your number so that our staff, while they're using their personal phone, is not actually giving out their phone number to individuals all over the county. Remind is a similar service and has some other features that we'll be able to use and is far, far cheaper. So that's the direction we move. Dr. Willow?
Yeah, I think the big improvement with Remind is that it syncs with Synergy, the gradebook. So it's actually a much easier process for our teachers to use to be able to send a group or a class message, whereas with Google Voice, it had no connection to our actual system. We wrote Google Voice as part of our grant from last year. It's one of our COVID grants that we had access to. It was meant to be something that was only going to be short-term, but we've heard feedback from community, both parents, students, and teachers, that there's value to this, so we went out and we explored a couple of different programs and picked the one that we feel is going to best suit the needs of our students, teachers, staff.
Considerably less expensive, I think.
Yeah, Google is around $150 per license per employee. So if we got 2,000, we're looking at $300,000 for Google Voice as opposed to 61 here.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Willard pretty much just answered it. My question was, in the rationale behind doing the Remind, you know, it says it was the Google Voice was purchased during the pandemic 2020 and 21 school year there. How much are the teachers still using it, and are we expecting that usage to continue?
Well, we had some grant funding for Google Voice in some of our schools. They used specifically at the elementary level. We also were able to provide counselors and I think case managers with the access, but this is something our teachers have not had. And so
Well,
we are.
I guess, I mean, Google Voice, were they still using that this current school year as well, or?
No, so only the groups I mentioned are using it currently.
Okay.
And that, again, I think it's with any tool. We see it being used often in some cases and less frequently in other cases. That's why when we looked at Remind, looking at the ease for teachers and the connection right to the gradebook and to Synergy so that the numbers are authentic, that we're communicating, and we know who we're communicating with, that was part of the reason why we went with this purchase.
And if I remember correctly, when I was reading it, it was a one-year contract with the option to renew it for 4 times, was it?
I think this is just a yearly agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess we would then be able to just go back and, you know, monitor how much it's being used to determine if it's worth continuing to use.
Correct.
I think we're able to capture metrics out of this and things like that.
We were able to capture metrics out of Google Voice, and we'll be able to capture metrics out of this as well.
Thank you.
We're definitely seeing text as a preferred way for parents to want to communicate with teachers. More so than email, more so than phone calls.
You want to get Mr. Gupta and I do have a question then?
Couple of questions about the mental and behavioral health providers. So how does this affect our current mental health system? Like, what does this change?
Well, we had this bid in, we did this bid 3 years ago, I believe. So this is not a renewal of that bid, but a new bid. We didn't have as many providers last time. We initially awarded 3 providers. One of those providers closed their Washington County office, so we were down to 2 providers. This will afford student services the ability to have a bigger pool of mental health providers that they're able to, you know, send out to different schools, you know, on an as-needed basis, that can be paid, in this case, by grant, but, you know, and it could potentially, you know, be paid out of other funds as well if you know, it was required.
The nice part to add to that is that Title IV is recurring, so this is something that we can keep doing year after year.
And my other question is, I'm not sure if you'll have to answer this, but do you know what the current waiting time is for a student who might need these services and isn't able to get them?
I do not have a current wait time. I might have to defer to, if there's someone else in the room from Student Services. I think we're about to get an answer.
The shoes help, we hear you coming.
I got it. Good evening. So the current wait time kind of ranges. It depends on the provider. So like was shared by Mr. Bagdell, we have 2 providers right now. We're going to have 2 additional. So my goal with adding these 2 additional, if it's approved tonight, is to kind of reallocate everyone so that each school can shorten their wait time. Some schools are maybe a few days, some are up to 2 weeks.
And I understand that we also have some staff, like school psychologists and social workers. How do they help with this? And why do we have these outside mental health providers if we already have current staff?
So our current staff, our school-employed mental health providers, do have a first line of defense to provide resources to our students, but as I'm sure you're familiar with the budget, as we continue to try to add more, we don't have quite enough yet to meet all the needs. So this is kind of a supplemental resource. I would love to find us one day have enough funds to support as many mental health staff as we need across all of our buildings, but as we continue to build that, this is just a supplemental resource to not tax our current staff too much.
Thank you.
Yeah, pretty simple. It's on the network switches. I noticed in the back here, it says that we are purchasing 18 network internet switches, but they're going in 9 schools. Is there 2 per school? Is that how it's, or is it just 1 for school? And
I think I'm going to have Mr. Allen sit down.
okay.
Good evening, President Williams, Dr. Michael, members of the board. Yes, there are 2 switches. There are actually 5 different kinds of switches. These particular ones, there will be 2 going into the schools. The schools are Hancock Middle High, Clear Spring High, Boonesboro High, Smithsburg High, Ruth Ann Monroe Primary, North Hagerstown High, South Hagerstown High, Williamsport, and Marshall Street School.
So there's 2 in every school then?
Of this type, yes.
So, I mean, obviously, we have other schools, and we've had it, I remember seeing them before on the procurement. So will we be replacing these other ones, or are they just a different character altogether?
So they all age differently. The average service life of a switch is about 7 years, so you're going to see them cycle through. They're not all purchased at the same time.
Okay, because it says here that they were, how they call that? End of life. So if they're at the end of life, is it the rest of them the end of life too, or they were purchased differently at different times and they go bad at different times? Is that what it is?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
We try to stagger it so that they're not all going bad, and you're asking for a lot more money, you know.
Right. So I just didn't know if you're going to get some free money. I was going to say, if you're going to get more, maybe that's what you need to do, but I see what you're saying now, so thank you.
Are there any other questions? Any further discussion? And we'll move to the vote. We're voting on Mr. Bickford's motion and Mrs. Murray's second to approve this evening's consent agenda as presented. All those in favor? Okay, we have 7 affirmative votes. Student member concurs, so we have an approved consent agenda. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is the donation of the playground. Good evening, Dr. Palmer.
Good evening, President Williams, Dr. Michael, members of the board. I'm requesting approval of a Lou Interactive Playground valued at $27,965 to Bester Elementary from Sam Marr Family and Community Services in coordination with Bester Community of Hope. And this will cover the cost of the system and the installation. So the Lou transforms any space into an interactive and immersive educational environment where kids are engaged physically, intellectually, and socially emotionally. Bester plans to begin the utilization of this system during PE classes, but they anticipate being able to use it in their after-school program as well as summer school coming up. So the Lou can transform a normal wall in the gym class into an interactive touch screen. It can detect movement, it can detect objects, so if the students, if you can visualize like a gamified wall where students can throw balls at different objects, they can respond to questions, and it's an interactive way to respond. It is multiple contents can be included in this. So it really is just a way to engage kids both socially, emotionally, and physically in learning multiple different contents where they're starting with PE. So thank you for considering the gift.
Thank you, Dr. Palmer. Is there a motion?
I move to approve a gift of Lou Interactive Playground valued at $27,965 from Sanmar Family and Community Services, doing business as Bester Community of Hope.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Any questions for Dr. Palmer? Any discussion? Mr. Stelter?
Is this, I don't know what this is really, but is.
Installed so we can see what it is.
Well, I'll be honest with you. Is this
So
something
when they
like,
have it-
is
right,
this something
as soon
like
as
similar
it's
to what we used to
installed-
call the WE program years ago or something, or, remember that?
I think if you can visualize it that way,
Can't hear
it'll
you.
help. If you can visualize it in that way, it can help. So
Okay.
it's similar to that, but it's much more educationally driven.
Well, I'm
Teachers
sure
can
it is.
create lesson plans that are tailored to all contents, honestly, from what I understand. So they will invite you as soon as it's installed and you can be the first to try it out.
We'll let you play on that
I'll
playground.
probably be worse than the kids at it, so, whatever it is, I'll check it out. Thank you.
It sounds like a wonderful gift. Okay, we'll move to.
Yeah,
the-
you got Mr. Bigwood.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I'm definitely going to vote yes on this. I just wanted to take the opportunity. I'm very familiar with Sanmar Family and Community Services. Obviously, they played a large role in the community. And it's sort of the strange situation we're in because we're very lucky to have an organization like Bester Community of Hope, but unfortunately, we need that kind of a service. But they are an excellent partnership in Bester and have made a lot of difference. So and it's just fantastic to see this as one more way that they're contributing to improving our community. So, thank you.
Any other comments? All right, we'll move to the vote. We're voting to approve a gift of a Lou Interactive Playground valued at $27,965 from the Sanmar Family and Community Services doing business as Bester Community of Hope. All those in favor? All right, we have 7 affirmatives. Student member concurs. We have approved. Thank you, Dr. Palmer, and please thank, on our behalf, the Bester Community of Hope for such a wonderful gift. I look forward to Mr. Stauffer's report.
From the hospital, you never know.
Okay, this time, we have a request of the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts Foundation, Inc., to approve a naming right, and we have Mrs. Ram back with us. Good evening again.
Good evening again. The Barbara Ingram School for the Arts Foundation Incorporated and the Board of Education entered into a naming rights agreement on November 19, 2019. The naming rights agreement authorizes the foundation to identify entities and persons who would be willing to donate funds in exchange for being granted naming rights to the Vincent Roth Grow Academic Center school facilities located in the Academic Center and the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts School campus. In accordance with the naming rights agreement, the foundation has identified an individual willing to donate funds in exchange for being granted naming rights to Painting Loft 402, located on the 4th floor of the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts building. The foundation is seeking the Board of Education's approval of the naming right at this time.
Thank you, Mrs. Ram. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the naming right for the Painting Loft 402 on the 4th level of the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts building as requested by the Barbara Ingram School for the Art Foundation, Inc.
Thank you, Mr. Gesford. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Any questions, or any discussion? Mr. Gesford?
You know, I just, dumb questions, but the Painting Loft 402 is the name, is that the name of the person that's,
It's the current classroom.
so that's the name that's going to be on the wall?
That is the classroom that was to be
Being
named.
area.
Okay, so whose name's going up there?
I heard Mike Gesford's going to put up about $10,000.
I'm looking at the donor information form.
Tonight might have been the request to use that as a naming right area, but
Correct.
might not have been identified before. I'm
It
not
does-
positive.
Correct. It doesn't have a name identified yet. They've identified an individual willing to donate, but we don't have the name. Once the board approves that, then the name will come forward.
So it says the naming rights agreement authorizes the foundation to identify entities and persons who would be willing to donate funds in exchange for being granted naming rights to the Vincent Roth Grow Academy Center.
So I'm not positive, but I think in our naming rights, we go down a whole list of rooms or
So they're
areas.
just asking
depending
for the
upon-
name, they're not asking for the person,
To that list.
Yes.
they're just asking for them to name the room.
Make that room available for naming rights, I think is what it is.
And we have identified, there's a pledge form an individual fills out. So first, we have to secure that we're allowed to name that room. The board has approved that, and there'll be another action item at a later date approving the donation to be allowed to name the room.
Okay,
It's a
so we're just
two-step
not
process.
allowing somebody to come in after we vote on something to put their name up on the wall.
Correct.
Okay.
You are
I just want to
correct.
make sure, we want to clarify that, so, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so we'll move to the vote. We're voting to approve the naming right for Painting Loft 402 on the 4th level of the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts building as requested by the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts Foundation, Inc. All those in favor? All right, we have 7 affirmative votes. The member concurs, motion carries. Thank you, Mrs. Ram. Okay, next up, we have the blueprint update regarding National Board certification with Dr. Willow, our Associate Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction.
Good evening, President Williams, Dr. Michael, members of the board. I hope that this is the first of a series of presentations that I'll be sharing with you on the blueprint. Tonight, we're going to focus on National Board certification and how that is actually aligned in the blueprint. So the National Board certification actually has 4 components to it. The first component is a content knowledge assessment. Again, teachers have the ability to pick which areas of National Board certification they're choosing to become certified in. Components 2, 3, and 4 are portfolio-based and are turned into National Board certification as for approval as part of the process. Typically, this takes 1 to 2 years to complete. In some cases, it can take up to 3 years. This is a very rigorous process. For those that have gone through it, some of the comments that we hear, a lot of self-reflection, valuable professional learning experience, because it really allows you to look at the practices that are occurring in your classroom. As we move forward with National Board certification, as this becomes a bigger part of Blueprint, we need to anticipate the cost. So each one of the 4 components that I just mentioned has a cost of $475. So the program is $1,900. What we do in Washington County is we have an application process for National Board certification. It's a cohort model. We will begin advertising again here soon. We've already alerted staff that registration opens on March 1st and that our next cohort meeting is April 7th. For teachers that go through our cohort process, MSD is required to pay 2/3 of that cost. We would be responsible for 1/3 of the cost. Currently, we take that out of Title II funding, and we anticipate, even with larger amounts of teachers interested in this process, that we would be able to continue to use Title II funding. Title II is recurring, so therefore, it's not something that comes and goes like some of our other grants. Not as common, but certainly an option, is a teacher choosing to do this process on their own. Why would a teacher choose to do that? Perhaps they didn't meet the initial deadline to be able to apply to be eligible for the state funding, and they want to start it outside of that window and they want to work at their own pace. Certainly that is an option. It's not something that happens very often, but it is something that could happen. I want to talk about how National Board certification is impacted in Blueprint. I'm going to start long-term. And when I say long-term, I say July of 2024, but realistically, that's not that far away. While tonight, we're not focused on the career ladder. That will be a presentation that I come back and share with you. It's a presentation all on its own. National Board certification is part of the career ladder. So when we look at level 1, we talk about a certified teacher, okay, which would make sense, the start of the career ladder. As we work our way up the career ladder, level 2 is a certified teacher pursuing a master's degree, 30 credits approved by the Maryland State Board of Education or National Board certification. The next step in that career ladder is someone that attains National Board certification, so meaning that they're a holder. Or Blueprint spells out that for some areas, if there's not a National Board certification for that particular content area, a master's degree would be the equivalent. Let's talk about more current, okay? So that's the career ladder, which is further out. Currently, beginning on July 1st, 2022, so this July, all NBC teachers receive a $10,000 salary increase. That's important. That salary is on there. This is not a stipend. Salary impacts retirement, so this is part of Blueprint, and it's effective this July. So how many National Board certified teachers do we have in our county? This map might be harder to see from your seats, but there are 28 in our county. And there's a map across the state of the number of national board certified teachers. Believe it or not, for a county of our size, 28, when you compare us with Frederick, with double the staff, we're actually not that far behind. It is not something that has been necessarily pushed in the past. It hasn't been part of previous legislation, but we do have a number of teachers that have gone through that process. If we keep going, there's a second part of Blueprint and National Board Certification, this idea of a low-performing school. So a low-performing school is a school that's identified as a 1-star or 2-star school under the Maryland Accountability System. Some of you might remember that as the Maryland Report Card. It has been inactive for the past 2 years due to COVID and the lack of data. We fully anticipate the Maryland Report Card to come back on next year in December or January as we go into assessments and we have all of our students back in the building and we're keeping track of attendance and all of the other factors of that Maryland Report Card. I'm happy to announce that not happy to announce that there are 92 schools in the state. I'd prefer that number to be 0. But we have 0 low-performing schools to meet that state definition. There's another option. And that's why I'm here tonight. It's called local flexibility, and what we will call is opportunity schools. So let's talk about the requirements of an opportunity school. A local Board of Education can identify schools under the following parameters. So if we took elementary, middle, and high, and we put them in order from top to bottom, and how would we separate them based on the academic performance on that Maryland Report Card from 17-18 and 18-19. You cannot identify more than 10% of your schools. So for the most that we could identify for this local flexibility option would be 4. The state has already completed this process for us. There are 4 schools, again, based on this local flexibility option that tonight, national board certified teachers at Bester Elementary, Northern Middle School, Western Heights Middle School, and South Hagerstown High School would be eligible beginning July 1st for a $7,000 salary increase. That is on top of the $10,000 salary increase, okay? So at those particular schools, I think I want to just stress something. Every school system in the state has the ability to do local flexibility. So it's not like these schools were picked as a punishment. We don't have any that fall under that low-performing definition. But if you had a sole system of every school and you put them in order of academic performance, there would always be some schools that would fall under the local flexibility option. And I know that can be confusing, so that's why I wanted to take my time to go through that to make sure that you were aware of that. Our recommendation is that you consider those 4 schools. Why? Well, because I think you see the value in the professional learning from the National Board Certification process. Okay? These are schools that have wider academic gaps. So having more teachers with that certification, with that background, to address gaps at these schools would be an excellent opportunity to work toward closing gaps. The cost right now, and even long-term, is state funded. So these are dollars that come from the state for both the $10,000 salary increase and the $7,000 for the local flexibility option. So I think there's a motion for you to consider, and then I'll gladly entertain any questions you have on this.
Thank you, Dr. Willow. Is there a motion? Pardon?
I was going to ask a question before we had the motion.
Okay, is there a motion? Would you like to make the motion?
Well, I can. I move to approve the, I'm on the wrong thing, excuse me. I got it. Put my glasses on. I move that the following schools be approved under the local flexibility option as follows: Bester Elementary, Northern Middle School, Western Heights Middle School, and South Hagerstown High School, and that eligible national board certified teachers at the above referenced schools receive the additional $7,000 a year in salary, as described in the blueprint for Maryland's future law.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Now, we can have some questions for Dr. Willow, or any discussion.
I have a question back on the first page. The 4 components, how are they assessed on content knowledge? Do they sit before a board like you would if you were taking an oral exam to defend a dissertation or something, or do they take a test?
It's
or-
a written assessment.
Okay. And what about component 2, a test?
No, component 2, 3, and 4 are portfolios. Oftentimes, you'll video yourself teaching and doing the different activities, and then that is submitted to the National Board for approval.
Mr. Gupta?
This isn't a comment. This isn't a question. This is just a comment. I just want to say I have a teacher who's national board certified, and she is really one of the best teachers I've ever had. She teaches English, and she's just really, really great. I really believe in this national board certification thing. If she's certified, I put my trust in this because she's just really an amazing teacher. She's recognized as students as one of a great teacher. I mean, everybody loves her.
Anyone else? All right, we'll move to the vote. We're voting on approving the local flexibility option as follows: Vester Elementary, Northern Middle School, Western Heights Middle School, and South Hagerstown High School, and that the eligible National Board Certified teachers at the above referenced schools receive the additional $7,000 a year in salary as described in the blueprint for Maryland's future law. All those in favor? Okay, 7 affirmative votes, and student member concurs, motion carries. Thank you very much, Dr. Willow. I have Mrs. Ramback for the first reading of Policy BG, Policy Setting.
Thank you. The Policy Committee reviewed Policy BG at the request of the Board of Education President at its public work sessions on January 25th and February 10th. The committee paid specific attention to the section of the policy on approving emergency policies and is recommending several changes to the section. The committee's recommended changes will provide the Board of Education with a more detailed process for approving an emergency policy. The committee is also recommending changes to the section of the policy on making stylistic modifications to policies. The committee's recommended changes remove the superintendent from the process of making stylistic modifications. The Board of Education develops and approves policies, therefore, the Board of Education should be the only one authorized to make changes to its policies. The committee is recommending the Board of Education approve the first reading of proposed changes to Policy BG at this time.
Madam President, I move to approve the first reading of proposed changes to Policy BG entitled Policy Setting.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Any questions for Mrs. Ram? Any discussion? Mr. Bickford, would you like to speak to the policy?
I think the biggest, Ms. Ram, could you just go over the biggest changes on page 3 under 2 with regards to time limits?
I certainly can. So the distinction there is that if a policy is passed with a time restraint, say it's short, like 10 days or whatnot, you don't need to have an emergency policy committee meeting because there's already a defined period. But by operational law, an emergency policy can only be in effect for up to 6 months. So if an emergency policy is passed without any indication of a time, although we know it's by operational law 6 months, the policy committee should then convene to have a discussion about its implications, the length of time, or how it impacts other existing policies.
That was the biggest impact for me, so.
Mr. Evans?
Yeah, I do have a concern with this. I am happy that we brought it up. My concern about this is in section B on the bottom of page 2 there, bottom of page 2 of 4. it starts out with saying, adoption of new policies or the revision or rescission of existing policies is solely the responsibility of the Board of Education. And then we go down to part 3 of that section, and we give the superintendent the opportunity to make policy. I understand why we do that. You know, if there's an emergency that happens and we're not going to meet for another 2 weeks, you know, something needs to be done. I would like that section 3 to be changed so that at the subsequent board meeting, the board goes to vote on it to determine if that should remain in place or not. Because like I said, otherwise, part 3 in that just seems to me like it contradicts the very first part of that. So I'm happy we brought this up. I don't think we're necessarily, I understand the change that we're making here, but without that change, I don't think I'd be in support of this policy change.
If I may address that, respond to that. What 3 is saying is that it's not the superintendent that can actually make any policies. That section talks about if for some reason there's not a policy at all, but we need to immediately act on something, the superintendent can address it and then make a recommendation to the board for the need for a policy, and then the board would determine if there is a need for a policy. We removed in this policy any references to the superintendent having any control other than in regulation.
So, you know, to kind of kick back on that a little bit and, you know, say what you will, whether you agree or disagree, shortly before the state board went and made their requirement that all students be masked, the superintendent did go and put that into place, I believe it was a week earlier or whatever. That was something that would have been in place without us actually voting on it. And so, to me, that's what I'm seeing here, and I don't see how this changes that. That is, I know Dr. Michael said that he sees that as his duty. I don't see how that goes into operations. I see how that is policy in that, and that's why I don't support this.
Any other comments, questions, discussion?
This is first read, so we have another committee meeting to go through any changes or comments that we get, so we can certainly discuss those in the committee meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move to the vote. The vote is to approve the first reading of proposed changes to policy BG entitled Policy Setting. All those in favor? I'm sorry, I almost counted you. 4 affirmatives. And again, this is first read. Opposed? Motion carries. First read of this policy has been approved, and so it will go back to committee, and we will await comment. Thank you. Mrs. Rand? We have another first read, and that's policy BJ, legislative program.
The Policy Committee reviewed Policy BJ at the request of staff at its public work sessions on January 25th and February 10th. Staff asked for review in order to update the section on the makeup of the legislative response team as it relates to the Office of Chief Legal Counsel. The committee agreed with staff's recommendation to change the policy to reflect that the Chief Legal Counsel may designate an individual in their place to be a member of the legislative response team. The committee recommended additional changes to the policy, which include defining legislative representative, clarifying when the Board of Education is to meet annually, and removing the inclusion of the legislative representative on the legislative response team unless designated by the Board of Education. The committee is recommending the Board of Education to approve the first reading of proposed changes to policy BJ at this time.
Thank you, Mrs. Ram. Is there a motion?
First reading of proposed changes to policy BJ entitled School Board Legislative Program.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Discussion or questions for Mrs. Ram?
and I may be wrong, because I've been here for a little while, but it seems like our lead counsel has always been the person on this legislative. Why are we asking for the representative now?
If I may. There was a period of time before my time when there was only chief legal counsel and there wasn't anyone else in the office. Now there are two of us, there's a deputy and myself. And as we look at dividing the different tasks across the district, we were at the request that to allow for the deputy to sit on the legislative committee.
Anything else? Any other questions? Any discussion? Okay, so we're voting on the motion to approve first reading of proposed changes to policy BJ entitled School Board Legislative Program. All those in favor? Okay, opposed? Motion carries. We have 6 affirmative, 1 in opposition. Mr. Gupta, what was your vote? I didn't. Okay, so you're concurring with the 6 affirmative votes. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Ram. Next item on the agenda is the consideration of a resolution.
So I do think that this is long overdue, but maybe it worked out a little better by waiting a little bit. Little backstory on this, I was at the grocery store this weekend. I can't remember if it was Saturday or Sunday. And I had 3 people come up to me, 2 of whom I know, and 1 person I had never seen before in my life. But this person recognized me through the meetings, and I don't know if it's just because of my bald head, I don't know. But she asked me, why aren't we doing anything about the masks? And unfortunately, I have to give the same answer. You know, unfortunately, the state is requiring it at this point, and you know, as far as I know, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, it's part of state law. So the state, you know, kind of goes back to what I was saying, you know, our job, what we're elected to do, well, you guys were elected, I was appointed to do, is to create policy for this school system. So I would like to just let the state know how we feel about that. I would hope that other board members would agree with me that, you know, we were elected to do a job, and it seems like the COVID-19 protocols right now are taken out of our hands, and I feel as though that we were elected to make these decisions for our families, for our community, and the voters asked us to do that, not to ask this to happen from the state. So I'll just read the resolution real quick, just so people know what it says. It's dated today, February 15th. Whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has been a disruption for Washington County Public Schools students, education, and social emotional well-being, and whereas that according to the Center for Disease Control, imminent threats cited in the original COVID-19 emergency are no longer the prevailing concerns related to COVID-19, such that the Delta variant is no longer commonly found in positive patients, as well as the approval for vaccines for all children aged 5 years and older. And whereas parents, guardians, and family doctors understand the unique medical history and needs of their respective children and have asked us, their elected representatives, to make policies and procedures reflecting the same regarding COVID-19 protocols on their behalf. And now therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education of Washington County requests that full control be given back to local boards of education to make jurisdictional decisions regarding COVID-19 protocols that are in the best interest of the students of Washington County, And it is further resolved that the Board of Education will post a copy of this resolution on the WCPS website's homepage, as well as transmit a copy of this resolution to the State Superintendent of Schools, State Board of Education, the President of the Senate, the Speaker of the House of the Maryland General Assembly, and the Washington County delegation to the Maryland General Assembly. And then it gives the date there. So I move that the Board of Education of Washington County approve the resolution to regain control over the COVID-19 protocols.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Any discussion, any questions? Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Evans, I understand where you're coming from. I have different people coming up to me. One of them is my grandson, who attends school regularly. He is not ready to take off his mask, and he's thankful that other people are masking as well. I've been visited several schools. I don't see any kids having problems with the masks. And as the numbers are going down, but they're not down to where I feel comfortable. Also, the state board is going to meet in less than 2 weeks, and they're going to make a decision. And I feel that I'd like to wait and see what they decide.
So, and can I respond to that?
No.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Dr. Zentmeyer.
I think it's no mistake that Maryland is called America in miniature. We are as different from the Eastern Shore and even Allegheny and Baltimore City. We are unique. This is not addressing masking. This is addressing home rule. And I think it's time for us to say, we know more about our county than anyone else.
We'll get back to you
Yeah,
in the
go
second
ahead.
go-round.
She pretty much said what I was going
Okay,
to
is
say.
there any other?
Well, I would just say this. I don't want to be long-winded, but I don't like masks, but I've said this many times publicly in this session. And other people that come up to me in various places. I've said many times, the goal was to try to keep kids in school in person as much as possible and keep them off the computers with virtual learning. The state board mandated the masking. I'm of the inclination, since they're going to meet on the 22nd, I think my gut feeling is, this is just me, but my gut tells me that they're going to make a decision that I think people will like. And so I am ready to wait and see what they do at that time. And then, if the board wishes so, to discuss it then. But I don't think it's necessary for us to send a thing to the state. I don't know of any other school district in Maryland that's doing this. At least I didn't hear anybody on the legislative committee meeting last month, I guess that was the 7th, say anything about that. So I would just like to wait and see what the state board's going to do on the 22nd.
Mr. Gesser?
So I don't see this, as Dr. Zentmeyer said, as a masking issue. You know, I think this is one of those things where, as an elected official, we were not in that decision-making. And I think that's what I have a problem with, is when someone takes my right given by the people of Washington County to make those decisions. I think it should be mask option. You let the parents choose. You know, but that's not what that resolution's about. I think that resolution's just saying that we should be the one that govern our students and our area. We know better for our area versus they think they know better for Washington County and Garrett and Carroll and all those other ones. I would say, though, I think that there has been another county that has gone against the state, and I think it's Carroll County.
Carroll County, yeah.
So, I mean, they're against it. So, you know, and just because they're meeting doesn't mean that they're going to make that decision, you know. But, and again, all this is, I mean, I guess maybe I'm saying this out of content, but I'm thinking it's just, you're just saying that we are saying we want the right to make decisions for our area. Is that what you said?
Yes,
Not,
sir.
it has nothing to do with masks. I mean, that would be a totally different area. I mean, and I get you, Mrs. Williams, or Mrs. Maria, I get it. But I think there's a lot of parents out there, and they've come before us and talked about, I mean, the young lady out there spoke tonight about her kids didn't like masks, and you're saying a lot of people do, that you didn't hear very many. Well, there's one. There's probably other ones out there that don't. But that has nothing to do with what Daryl's asking. We're just asking for the right to make our decision for our students because in our govern our area in Washington County as the elected officials. They weren't elected to govern Washington County. If they want to do an emergency fine, do that, say 2 weeks. Then throw it back to the counties and say, you have to make the decision for your area. That's all I think we should be doing. Is we're getting paid to do a job. We should be able to do it. So I support that.
I'd like to say several things. The first thing I'll say is that I am a proponent of local governance. And I will say that the state board acted with its authority to do what it did. And there were 2 letters written by members of the AELR committee before they, in the legislature, approved what the state board did. They had the authority in this emergency situation. I see nothing to be gained by putting our finger in the eye of the state board and saying now, well, no, you didn't have the right to do that. That said, anyone who knows me and knows me well knows that I give a great deal of thought with regard to what's written on paper with my name attached to it or is a product of my work. I had no input into this. This was not something we did together. This is the work of one individual. There are several whereas clauses that I am not in agreement with. One statement being parents, and this is the third whereas, parents, guardians, and family doctors understand the unique medical history and needs of their children. I do not question that. And have asked us, their elected representatives, to advocate on their behalf. Some have, 2 handfuls perhaps. We have 22,000 students in Washington County. I have no idea how the parents of those students feel about this. I've heard from one grandparent down here, but I'm not ready on the basis of 2 handfuls of parents, individuals who have written us emails to do this. Again, poke the finger in the eye of the State Board of Education. I believe those who sit on that Board of Education respect local control as well. But in the face of an emergency, such as a global pandemic, I think they did everything that they could possibly do to keep our students safe. So I feel as though I would like to show them the respect of waiting until February 22nd when they review. They've heard from the governor. They know what Carroll County thinks. They've certainly have had parents write them, talk to them. I'm sure they're talking to the health experts. I see no rush to do this, and I don't see what purpose it serves other than to poke a finger in the eye of the state board. So I will be voting in opposition to the resolution.
So I'll say that I don't see how this is a poke in the eye. I just see that this is something where we're just asking for our authority back. I understand what you're saying, that they do have the authority. Obviously, they do, or at least for the time being, they do. We'll see if Carroll County is legal action means anything different, but I don't see how this pokes them in the eye. I think that the time is perfect because while the state board is meeting a week from today, I think it's important that they know how we feel one way or another. And this is not a poke in the eye. We've been quiet all along. As far as I know, we have not been asked our opinion, and I feel as though it's very appropriate for them to know that. So I strongly disagree that this is a poke in the eye. That is not my intent at all, and I don't see how this would represent that at all either. So I understand that that you may not appreciate that third whereas. I'm fine if that gets taken out as well, but I don't see how this has absolutely nothing to do, well, I shouldn't say this has absolutely nothing to do with the mask, because let's be honest, that is the underlying cause. But this is not a vote, one way or another, to say that we're removing masks. What I envision on this is that if this were to pass and the state board were to go and get rid of their mandate on the 22nd, that on March 1st, we would then have the opportunity to vote on it because that's what our job is. So I don't see how this is a thumb in the eye at all. I think this is just us doing our due diligence, letting them know how we feel right before they are set to take a vote on it. I guess I understand that you do feel differently. I don't think you should, but obviously the way you read is different than the way I read it, so.
Well, I don't think we should be judging board members or any public officials at any level of government based upon their position on just one issue. There are many issues that this board has to decide with, and as I said earlier, I am of the inclination to find out what the state board says. I personally, I know I have stood up for things and done my job as a board member over the last 5 years. And I just don't like the idea, I don't think it was intended, but I don't like the idea that, well, if you don't vote for this, then you're not doing your job as a board member, this and that and the other. Because, I would suggest that if you are a board member and you don't advocate for the funding necessary to do the job of the Board of Education, which is our main job to advocate for that, then maybe, that person's not doing their job on that. But I wouldn't judge them by that, if I'm making myself clear. So I don't see a person voting against this as a person, a board member, not doing their due diligence as a member of the Washington County Board of Education. As I said before, I don't see any need to do it. I will be voting in opposition to it.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to the motion? No? Yes, Mr. Bickford.
So I've really grappled with this because I do believe that I'm hearing the word endemic more and more. We're moving out of pandemic stage. We're moving to endemic. Everything that I do follow, many of the articles and news sources, and I am optimistic that we are heading in the right direction. So I guess when I read this motion from Mr. Evans, I saw it as really just encouraging the state board to change their mind, because I do think we are heading into a time where we are starting to see the end of this pandemic. And I also have trusted from the very beginning the leadership of Dr. Michael and his staff, and I know we all absolutely trust his leadership. And I do see some of the frustrations with the added bureaucracy. I thought some of the reasoning behind the requiring this, especially around musicians and athletes, I think there's just there's a lot of, there's just a lot of things that don't make sense. So I'm actually going to vote in favor of this. President Williams, I don't see it as a thumb in the eye. I see it as there's definitely been a change in conversation with our governor and with several state officials that we are moving towards the end of this, and I just sort of want to kick it along a little bit. So that's my position.
Can I say something? If we are going to vote on this and send it, can we change the wording? What did you say?
Could we change the wording?
You would
Have to
want
be-
to put forth an amendment.
Yeah, but
Do you have a recommendation, Linda?
I just think it needs to be more concise, that basically what we want. Okay, if we want local control, then that's what we say, not all of the things that are stated. Could it be more concise that way?
I mean, I guess we can, you certainly can make a motion to amend it. I personally think that that is said in there where, in the first now therefore, where we request the ability to make the jurisdictional decisions. You're certainly well within your rights to go and make a motion to amend it, as far as I know.
I have a question. You say, bring back local control, have this board make the decisions. Okay, so I assume one of the decisions would be to unmask. I get that. Is this board going to have the time to manage all the other aspects of COVID that staff has been dealing with for months, almost 2 years? Keeping track of contact tracing, the bulletin board? Are we going to still delegate that to staff? I'm just curious. What decisions would this board make?
I mean, I would imagine that'd be a question for Dr. Michael, but my understanding is we were doing that long before the state came out with their mandate, so I don't see how it would be any different moving forward from that.
That didn't answer my question. Are we going to continue?
Are you referring to like contact tracing and?
No, I mean, what's the,
It's been up to.
what's the plan for
Superintendent's been doing that. I mean,
continuing all that and so forth? I mean, are we going to direct the superintendent, well, do this, but not do this, and so forth? I mean, are we going to get that precise? I'm just asking. I don't know.
I just feel, I don't know how else to say it. I just feel, and again, maybe that's a Dr. Michael question. I feel as though we were doing that from day one, all the contact tracing, the quarantine, the phone calls, all that. I don't know how, this is just it says in that first part regarding COVID-19 protocols. So the state has taken that and, we're just, all this is just asking for that back, and really it is just the masking part of it that is what they're doing there.
I mean, I think this debate over masking,
But that's not what we're debating right now.
well, it is, really.
How so?
No, it's not.
How to do it.
Well, we've
That has nothing to do
we've
with the
hidden, we've
mask.
hidden that debate in other language, in my opinion, so I'll shut up there. I just think, I don't know. I just know that, I know we have to learn to live with this, I've said that, but I read stuff online where people say, well, I'm looking for a new doctor, new dentist, because he makes me wear a mask when I enter his business and so forth, and all that, this type of thing. I just don't get all those things that have that have come up about this. I do know this, people are still dying of this stuff. I just attended a funeral of a person, I won't give any identifying stuff. No known underlying causes. No underlying causes, was in her late 50s. Refused to get the vaccination, I was told by family members, absolutely wouldn't do it. Got COVID, was in the hospital from January 5th until she died earlier this month. And she died of it. So, I mean, this thing is serious. I don't know why some people don't get it. Some people do. I don't understand all that. I'm not a doctor. I don't know why I haven't gotten it at my age. Knock on wood, though, I haven't. And I've certainly been without a mask at certain places and so forth through the last 2 years of this thing. But I'm just, as I said earlier, I'm just willing to wait to see what the state board does, because if they do what I think they're going to do, and I don't have any inside sources, I think this is going to be a moot thing.
Ms. Williams, I call for the vote.
Okay, I would just like to say one more thing, if I may, Mr. Gessert.
Absolutely.
And that is that I appreciate what Mrs. Murray said with regard to wanting to make changes. I've already said what I said with regard to my disagreement with what's in the third whereas. It's my opinion that this was put together hastily. I know legal counsel provided some help and guidance. You know, if we could take some time to come up with something that was better crafted, I'd feel better about that than to send something in that's not totally representative of this board. But those are my thoughts.
Mrs. Williams, and I know the call for the question's been asked, but I think, I'm not positive of this, but I thought there was one other board that sent a simple letter requesting the exact same thing. Would that suffice? Would that be better? Well, I'm not a part of the discussion or whatever. I'm just offering a thought or a suggestion. Would a simple letter requesting local control be as equal to a resolution? Or is there a necessity for it to be actually a resolution? I'm not positive. I just feel like, I thought I heard rumor one other county just submitted a letter requesting for local control. Just support for local control, not a resolution. And that could be a very, very short, simple letter to the point of local control. And it gets your request known by the state board before they make their determination next Tuesday. And I hope they do take action. I've advocated with Mr. Chaudhry's office and some of his direct staff for something similar. I've been in contact, not with the governor, but some of the governor's staff, based on the press conference and some confusion that caused. And I think we're aware of the action now the governor's taken and the Republican caucus taken. I don't think it's necessary to file another lawsuit. That would cause us great expense. And I don't know that that'd be worthy. It could take a significant amount of time for that to actually get through any process. So I'm very optimistic that a week from now, we're going to hear from the state board something different. I don't know what it's going to be, whether it'll be different off-ramps, a different timeline, or whether they might completely relinquish their position back to local control immediately. At which point, if the board is still allowing me to make decisions, and I thought that's where we were, I'll be making the decision that same day and make an announcement depending upon what the state board does on February 22nd. But maybe a letter would be simpler, cleaner. You could even vote as a board that the president send a letter requesting for local control, and that letter could even be crafted after tonight's meeting. So just, all I'm doing is throwing out a suggestion.
I would be perfectly fine with that. I just want the point to get across that we let them know that we would like the ability to make the decisions. And actually, to your point, Mrs. Williams, I actually did ask Mrs. Ram about that. with your signature. I asked if we should all sign that or if you should sign that because I wasn't sure, obviously, because I didn't really speak to anyone about it, if everyone would be on board with this. So I am sensitive to the fact that people don't agree, and I don't want you to feel uncomfortable about that either. So if it's just a simple letter that says we would like to regain that local control, I'm fine with that. I just thought that a resolution was, if we were going to have a vote on it, I thought a resolution was the best way to do that. If a letter is all that's needed, I'm perfectly fine with that as well.
Any further discussion?
So I guess then the question is, if I were to withdraw my motion, then how would we still be able to go and just send that letter, or would that be
You'd have to
a
make
second
You'd
motion?
have to make a motion to, Mrs. Ram, could you come forward, please?
Mr. Evans, I think you could withdraw your motion. Dr. Zentmeyer would need to withdraw her second, and then you could make a new motion.
I second what Dr. Michael just said.
I'm
I'm in
Okay.
agreement.
So just withdraw your motion. April needs to withdraw her second.
I'm still thinking about whether I'm going to do that.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I guess really the only question I have before I do that is, how would that letter be written? Would I just be able to make a motion that says a letter written by our chief legal counsel requesting the local control, and then have it signed by the president of the board? Is that what we would do there?
Or would it come from you, Dr. Michael, as a representative of the board?
Well, I think it would have to come from
From
the
the
president of the board. And the board's done this many times, not many times, but a number of times. They've reached consensus or have taken a vote to send a letter to so-and-so to support this or not support that. Even legislation, they've submitted things. So I think you would make a motion that you send a letter to the State Board of Education requesting for local control regarding all COVID matters, that we do have control over, or that they've taken control over, and just support that. You could enumerate if there's things you wanted to list or include in that, but I think that's your main point. As I read the whole resolution, that's what it boils down to. You're requesting the State Board to return local control, and you could reference the legal citation or whatever that was that they did, just return what we had before back to local control. I'm sure legal counsel could craft that and share it with Mrs. Williams to submit if it's the will of the board.
And just to be clear, my signature just indicates that it is the majority. It was a
Exactly.
majority vote of the board.
Yeah, that's what we discussed. yeah.
Right,
So
right. So
that's
this-
why, like I said, that's why I asked that question, so I appreciate that. Not everyone would agree, so I'm in favor of withdrawing my motion, so, in favor of writing a letter, so, I would like to withdraw my motion.
My name on it. Okay, I withdraw my second. Now make a motion for the
So-
letter.
So, President Williams, I move that we, as the Board of Education, write a letter to the State Board of Education and the State Superintendent of Schools discussing requesting our local control be given back to us regarding COVID-19 protocols.
Second.
Amendment to add that it goes within the next 24 hours.
Okay, is there a second to Mr. Desford's proposed amendment?
I'll second that.
Okay, is there any discussion of the amendment?
On the amendment?
Time.
No.
I think we can pull that.
Not to the amendment.
On a
24
very
hours.
simple letter.
I have a question about the motion,
Okay,
Resolve the amendment first.
right.
Darrell's motion.
No question about the amendment. This will be done within 24 hours. Okay, all those in favor of the amendment? Those opposed?
I raised my hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You just didn't see it.
I just didn't see it. Are you sure you raised it? Okay. Back to the main motion.
I have a question about that. So you're asking for local control. I want to know then, because a majority of this board might decide, well, okay, we're going to end masking, all right. And we're not going to allow anybody to wear a mask. So is that how far it's going to go? I want to know precisely what decisions
That would
you
be
guys have in mind when you say local control. That's what I want to know.
That would be a completely separate discussion. This is just us sending a letter. Anything about the masks would be on another motion that would be involved. So that question, with all due respect, has absolutely nothing to do with what my motion.
So with all due respect then, if this board voted under local control, not to end masking, I'm just making something up, you would be fine with that?
If that's what the will of the board
Okay.
is.
I'm just asking, you know.
It is possible the board's going to have that authority regardless. It may be back in the board's hands on the 22nd
Yeah.
of next week anyhow. So it
Right.
doesn't, you're still going to have that, that could be coming your way as soon as the 22nd.
So the motion is.
Mr. Gupta has a question.
Mr. Gupta.
So under this local control, would the superintendent have the ability to choose, if this was passed and if we had control over our COVID guidelines, would the superintendent have the ability to choose whether students are, if it's mask optional or not, or would that fall under the board's purview?
My understanding, the way that, I mean, we just kind of discussed that policy today, the way it's written right now, you do have the authority to do that. But I would defer to Ms. Ram about that.
Well,
And that's how we've been operating, that I've had the authority to do that. When we made it, I made the decision back in the fall. I know people may or may not have clearly understood it, but it was about avoiding mass quarantine. We'd be quarantining thousands of people a week because the rules that we were following then without masks would have required everybody in the room that I've observed. I was in 3 schools today. I mean, every room I was in, the entire room would have to be quarantined back under those days. So that, I made very clear when I made a decision to go to masking, that allowed us to be within 3 feet. It allowed us to have full classes. It allowed us to return in-person instruction, and it avoided mass quarantine. So I would still like that authority to make the decision, but it's up to the board whether they want to, if I make a decision after the 22nd, if that opportunity is available, and the board chooses to make a different decision on March 1st, you can always overturn my decision.
That's what I would expect, yeah.
So the motion then is, I'm sorry, was there any further discussion or any further questions? So the motion is that the Board of Education of Washington County write a letter to the State Board of Education, request,
And the state superintendent.
and the state superintendent requesting local control in matters involving COVID protocols?
Yeah, COVID-19 protocols.
Is that close
Yes.
enough?
That is it, yeah.
Are we ready to vote? Okay. All those in favor of the motion? Okay, we have 5 affirmative. Those opposed? 2. Mr. Gupta?
The board's vote.
Okay, motion carries.
We'll prepare a draft of the letter
Oh, yes, you
and
did.
share it with the board sometime tomorrow morning. And then, needing approval, we'll get it signed and sent by the close of business tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Ram. Okay, at this time, we'll move to the superintendent's report. Dr. Michael.
As we typically do, we want to recognize some outstanding students. So at this time, I'd like to ask Trista Bowser, our Supervisor of Advanced Programs, to come forward. Tonight, we're going to recognize our Advanced Placement Scholars. So this is a designation placed on our students based on their AP scores. And I'll turn it over to Ms. Bowser.
Good evening, President Williams, members of the board, and Dr. Michael. This evening, we would like to recognize our students who have made outstanding achievements on advanced placement exams during the 2021 school year. It is important to note we are not able to recognize last year's graduating seniors, but we are recognizing current juniors and seniors this evening. We are excited to honor these students.
Okay, just so
Our
you know-
next group is AP Scholars with Honor. Those students who receive an average score of at least 3.25 on all AP exams taken and scores of 3 or higher on 4 or more of those exams. We will also recognize AP Scholars with Distinction, those students who receive an average score of at least 3.5 on all AP exams taken and scores of 3 or higher on 5 or more of these exams. Barbara Ingram School for the Arts, AP Scholars, Gabriella Gano, Gabriella Snyder. Boonesboro High School, AP Scholars, Riley Bach, Hannah Gagnon, Eleanor Hart, Jasmine Leonard, Max Margot, Abigail Mormon, Justin Osmond, Kendall Sisler, Olivia Stan, Isa Yusuf. AP Scholars with Honor, Elijah Deerdorf, Joshua Grubb, Natalie Hagen, Emma Price, Patrina Panchasudati. AP Scholars with Distinction, Michaela Bledsoe, Noah Hall, Bailey Pepperack, Ava Selby. Clear Spring High School, AP Scholars, Ryder Brown, James Farrell, Claire Hensley, Jarek McCauley, Autumn Osborne, Kate Plaisance, Leah Robinson, Kata Shives, Charlie Smith, Ethne Young. AP Scholars with Honor, Chloe Hess, Paige Rice. AP Seminar and Research Certificate, Jessa Garwood. Hancock Middle Senior High School, AP Scholar, Emma Stauffer. North Hagerstown High School, AP Scholars, Calissa Albertson, Kelly Bocoum, Kevin Bocoum, Chaz Cornejo, Adriana Cox, Joseph Jumboy, Mackenzie Gettle, Rachel Gross, Jordan Hakey, Jackson Huang, Ella Holloman, Emily Jordan, Eva Javel, Veronica Matuszewski, Rhea Mustafa, Shannon Perkins, Sophia Quam, Sophie Karashi, Alexandra Smith, Hayden Smith, Christopher Tenge, Eden Teodorovich, Musa Wasim, Ian Watts, and Yifan Zhang. AP Scholars with Honor, Mohid Basha, Tegan Chalker, Nico Cornejo, Anish Gupta, Tanish Gupta, Sarah Jordan, Jack Martin, Ryland Mata, Gabrielle McCafferty, Madeline Semler, Emma Shank, and Nancy Tobar Guzman. AP Scholars with Distinction, Brian Botang, Alexander Duncan, Ryan Fleetwood, Jaden O'Donohue, Rayon Shahid, Ali Zia. Smithsburg High School, AP Scholars, Amanda Hallbecker, Josh Hegby, Kaylee Neal, Emma Wilkinson, and Andrew Cross. AP Scholars with Distinction, Grace Kittle, Amina Pasha, and Lene Snyder. South Hagerstown High School, AP Scholars, Lorenzo DeCastro, Ian Lane, Elijah Lehman, Taylor Mayhew, Lauren Putiri, Taylor Richardson, Januki Rodrigo, Amnat Sutavea, Madeline Smith, Tyler Sokol, Christine Sun, and Rebecca Tellez. AP Scholars with Honor, May Cruz, Leon Zhang. AP Scholars with Distinction, Tyson Chung, Jenny Ha, Riley Haynes, Cameron Sierra. Washington County Technical High School, AP Scholars, Marley Bagash, Christian Loon, Ethan Page, Alexander Penwell, Josiah Pryor. Williamsport High School, AP Scholars, Maxwell Larkin, Darius Lee, Emily Moser, Mia Parker, Joseph Pierce, Ben Rhine, and Evan Turner. Join me in congratulating these students on their achievements.
Congratulations, Denise. I think that's an outstanding accomplishment of our students, and many of them will earn more AP honors and awards as they take AP exams yet this year, or some of the students may yet even be less than seniors and will have the opportunity to continue to advance on the AP list there with our Placement Scholars Program. At this time, the Maryland governor has announced that it's Gifted and Talented Month here in the state of Maryland. I've asked Dr. Willow to come forward and present a proclamation. Ms. Bowser, who's representing our Gifted and Talented students.
Good evening again. Whereas Maryland, consistently among the nation's highest-rated school systems, aims to reach world-class education standards and produce a globally competitive workforce. And whereas gifted and talented students are defined by law as students who have outstanding talent and perform or show potential for performing at remarkably high levels of accomplishment when compared with their peers. And whereas Maryland recognizes that gifted and talented students are found in youth from all cultural groups and economic strata. And whereas gifted and talented students require different programs and services beyond what is provided in the regular school program in order to reach their full potential. And therefore, be it proclaimed that February 2022 is observed by Washington County Public Schools as Maryland's Governor's Gifted and Talented Education Month, presented this 15th day of February 2022.
All right, congratulations. Okay, a couple other things I wanted to note. February is Black History Month. I have visited numerous schools during the month of February. I was in 3 schools today, and in all 3 schools, I observed Black History Month being celebrated. Bulletin boards, posters, I saw it celebrated in music, in art, in ELA classes and social studies classes where students are reading. Just today, Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King were just 3 figures I saw in 3 different rooms where students are researching, writing about Black History Month and historical figures and people that are contributing substantially to our culture here in the United States. So I just thank all of our teachers and staff that have worked to make that possible. While I'm talking about staff, I just want to continue to thank our teachers, our ESP staff, our educational support staff, our administrators. I continue to be just very, very pleased with what I see out in schools. We have full classrooms. Again, I feel like we've really returned, not quite to normal, but there are just so many good things happening at elementary, middle, and high school levels. I continue to see our reading tutor program, our math tutor program, our illustrative mathematics programs where students are writing about their thinking and sharing their thinking. I was in your class today and students were placing tens value of what was greater and less than. Young man was struggling a little bit, but their teacher was helping them along and they're getting there. And it's really encouraging to see how hard our staff works to help make our students successful. We also want to celebrate next Tuesday is School Bus Driver Day. And our school bus drivers are very, very important to us. They've continued to keep our routes running. Some other counties have failed routes over and over, make announcements the night before. They're not going to run certain routes. So far, we have not been in that situation, and I credit our drivers and their dedication and also our transportation team. So Tuesday, February 22nd, School Bus Driver Day. Be a great day, students, parents, as you see bus drivers get on the bus, get off the bus, thank them for their service. And be nice to do that even on every day, even beyond February 22nd. But we want to thank all of our school bus drivers on their special day coming up on February 22nd. Also today is National School Resource Officer Appreciation Day. Our men and women in blue, we are very, very grateful for in Washington County. Not only the service they provide in the community, but as resource officers in our schools. They're a valuable resource to us and to students, and we're very grateful for their service. So congratulations to them on National School Resource Officer Appreciation Day. We will let the community know what's happening with any COVID protocol changes. If anything changes with the state board next Tuesday, we'll be watching that meeting and keeping up to date with that. As I understand, there are possible changes if they make, I think what I understand. I'm not making a statement of fact. I'm making what I think. If they alter their change, it might have to go back up to that other committee or maybe back to the full legislative body for confirmation of whatever change they make. Let's say they change the date or change whatever. If they eliminate the proposal or the law, they have the power to do that and it's immediately dropped. So we'll actually wait and see what happens with that, and we'll keep the community informed. We'll plan on sending our SMORE communication with any update that we hear regarding the February 22nd meeting. I do want to end with a video and thank Technical High School for hosting us with the chamber. We had an excellent breakfast there. I guess it was just last week. I would say we had about 100 people there. They had the opportunity to tour our artificial intelligence, cloud computing lab, our advanced manufacturing engineering lab, our Cisco Academy. I think people were very, very impressed. They hadn't had the opportunity to be in that building since we renovated those 3 areas. We also provided a little update on the upcoming programs. That construction should start here in the next couple weeks. And I'm very, very excited about that with our new diesel program and the renovations to the 4 areas downstairs. So my comments today will end with our video. So cue our video up, please.
Washington County Public Schools was proud to host Eggs and Issues, a Washington County Chamber of Commerce breakfast series. After enjoying food prepared by the Tech High culinary students, local business representatives, elected officials, and community members learned about updates and enhancements to career and technology education programs across all county high schools. Guests then divided into groups for a student-led tour of several new programs at Tech High.
We saw the future workers of tomorrow learning the technology and the work and the crafts that they're going to need to be great employees and great citizens.
They really know what they're talking about. They clearly have a passion, and you can tell that the teachers, faculty, everybody have really built this. And they're clearly learning more than just skills. They're learning how to be great people, and I think that's pretty cool.
They're engaged, excited about what they're doing, and looking to build great careers.
Across the county, career and technology education is shaping the next generation of employees for our local community in careers of the future.
Really excited to see what's going on, to learn about the diesel engine program, the new building, the artificial intelligence, the computer science.
I'm so impressed by the breadth and the depth of the programs here. That is pretty cool. I don't think you find that many other places.
So we're really excited because we see a future tomorrow and into the years that's exciting for the students and for Washington County.
Students graduating from Washington County Public Schools are more prepared for their future than ever before.
It's fun to come back. It's fun to be in a learning environment because you can tell they love what they do, and if they do that, you know they're going to be great people.
I just thought it was a great morning, and I know a couple of board members attended, and I just thought it was a great opportunity to show off the talents of our students. Anytime our students get a chance to get in front of the public, they do us proud, as Denise does every 2 weeks. So that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. We'll move it this time to personnel actions with Dr. Pugh.
Good evening. As discussed earlier today in closed session, there are a number of staff changes before you for your consideration. At this time, I ask for your approval of personnel actions.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Is there a motion?
President Williams, I move to approve the personnel actions dated Tuesday, February 15th, 2022, as presented in closed session.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions for Dr. Pugh? Any discussion? And we'll move to the vote. All those in favor of approval of the personnel actions as discussed in closed session and dated today, February 15th, 2022. And 6 affirmative votes. Motion carries.
Mrs. Williams, if I might, there's one item that relates to me, and I'd like to share a letter that I shared with the Board of Education. Board of Education members, it is a true honor and privilege to serve the students, staff, and the greater community as superintendent of schools. Now in the latter half of my 43rd year with Washington County Public Schools and my 5th year as superintendent, it is time to bring my career in education to a close. I respectfully request the Board of Education to accept my retirement effective July 1st, 2022. I would like to express my sincere thanks to board members past and present who have placed their trust and confidence in me to make decisions in the best interest of students and our school community. I am truly grateful and blessed to have worked alongside a team of extraordinary and relentlessly committed teachers, educational support personnel, and administrators who exemplify the importance of meeting the unique needs of students in all that they do. I am so thankful for the countless ways that they have inspired me, their willingness to have honest conversations, and their unwavering dedication to students' success. I sincerely appreciate the partnerships among our school families and community stakeholders who have supported children in their education. Over the last 43 years, I've made an honest attempt to approach all decisions and circumstances with a student-first philosophy. I hope that my career has demonstrated my belief in creating a culture of continuous improvement, collaboration, and growth among all partners in our school system. Together, we have made great strides in changing the lives of children forever. The close of this school year presents an opportune moment of a transition for a change in leadership. Washington County has weathered through 2 years of a disruptive pandemic, and our collective efforts to support students have refined, strengthened, and enhanced their educational philosophies and methodologies. As the blueprint for Maryland's future legislation continues to unfold, and most recently start to be delayed, this is a time to transition to a new superintendent who will make long-term decisions regarding the implementation of these resources for years to come. It has been my great fortune to see the most talented and dedicated educators working towards a common goal of student success and achievement. Through the collaborative teamwork of all stakeholders, Washington County Public Schools is well positioned for success in the future. I strongly believe our learning community's greatest days are yet ahead. I want to thank all of our students, staff members, my colleagues, family, and community partners who have brought immeasurable joy and satisfaction and fulfillment to my life over the last 43 years. Additionally, I'd like to thank my wife, Denise, and our family for their support and sacrifices that have made my career possible. There's still much work to be done as we complete the school year, and I assure this board I am committed to finishing strong. Thank you again for the honor and the rewarding opportunity to serve Washington County Public Schools. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
President Williams, could I say something real quick? So, Dr. Michael, I don't know how frequently you say it, but I believe I've heard you say it very frequently, that the job that us 7 do is one that you would never want in a million years. And I do think that it is worth noting that your job is infinitely more difficult than ours. What you do is very special. I truly appreciate everything you have done in the short time I've had the opportunity to know you. I've been on the board now for about 15 months, and it is truly a privilege to be able to see what you've been able to do during difficult times. So obviously, we don't always agree on the way things are done or voted on or whatever, but always, very respectful, and I appreciate your leadership, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evans.
I'll save my comments for board member comments.
All right, we'll move to reports to the board. Our first item under reports to the board is the legislative briefing on the 2022 legislative session. We have with us Mrs. Ardith Cade, who is our legislative representative, and looks like we have someone joining her. Mrs. Erstrom. Good evening.
You got patience.
Yeah, she adored the meeting.
She's a hard worker.
What a surprise, sad surprise for many of us who have such respect for what you have done in this school system. I'm Ardith Cade, and your legislative representative, and I'm happy to say that things in Annapolis are moving, not real fast. Not much has gone to the floor yet, but things are churning, and they're starting to have in-person committee meetings in the Senate. One favorable bill that I spoke of last time is the fact that the IAC is agreeing, that would have to agree that to fund smaller systemic renovations from the Build to Learn funds. They have changed it to projects of at least 100,000, but in today's age, 100,000 is still a small project in many cases. I alluded in my written report to the complex discussions we'd had about virtual education and virtual schools. And not only now do we have this very complicated bill, but the House has put in an equally complicated bill. And I'm not going to talk about any of the issues about it tonight, about either one. I'll bring that back to you next month, because I've been told that I must not go on as long as I have been going on so much. Another bill that's getting good support is the one that Senate Bill 410, which would, for the next 2 years, allow the no limit on the rehires of school personnel, teachers, et cetera, and where if you've had a limit on that in the past of people who retired and are coming back. There's a lot of bills still that are complicated. The one that requires that all special education rooms would have a video camera that would be on, and if there was a conflict, then there would be a review by the administration of what went on. Those would be kept from 3 to 6 months. There's a lot of privacy issues. There's a lot of cost issues. So I'm not sure where that bill will go. That's Senate Bill 577. House Bill 547, again, is a complicated bill that it has to do with non-visual access accountability, so that in procuring any digital equipment, it would have to also have a component that would allow for low vision persons to be able to access the information. Again, very expensive, pretty complicated, and perhaps could be done by focusing it where on the individuals that are needing it, but not necessarily making it universal. A couple of bills that are related to career readiness. Senate Bill 422 requires a pathway for high school students to get commercial vehicle licenses while they're in high school when they turn 18, so that they could be prepared to be truck drivers, bus drivers, heavy equipment operators. And it also would allow a county to hire a bus driver at the age of 19 and a half, which is younger than is currently allowed. Senate Bill 318 requires that if you are paying for SAT tests, you would also be required to pay for entrance exams or certification exams for apprenticeship programs, an equity issue that's kind of an interesting thought. Although I think that may be a rather large expense, especially in some of those career paths. House Bill 504 is the public school employee, gives the public school employees, it doesn't speak to teachers, it's the right to strike. And it takes out certain legislation that is currently in place and says whereas associations do not have the right to strike, this would say that these were non-certified people would have the right to strike. It is a bill put in by one legislator, and that's usually a sign that it's not something that there's a big groundswell for, so it's probably not going to move. I think that we will, at the end of this session, have a requirement for a financial literacy curriculum that would be a half-semester course required for graduation. And this is, we've talked about this probably as many years as I've been coming here, but I think this year it is likely to become a law. And there will be some kind of law, I think, passed relative to cybersecurity training, both for teachers and, staff of all sorts, but also for students. Again, there's a bill in that would be a pilot program for electric school buses. This time, the vendor would be the initiator and would be carrying most of the responsibility and with a rebate to the schools. A complicated bill, again, and I don't know where it's going yet at all. There's a 50-page bill in. Oh, you love it when you get a 50-page bill on climate solutions, the Climate Solution Act of 2022. But it has enormously strong sponsorship, so it's likely that something is going to come out of it. Way buried in about page 44 of that 50 pages, it talks about a net zero school grant fund, and it would be federal funds or other funds, and it would be used to substitute or to allow about a $3 million payment on school construction programs to cover the gap between there being the normal energy level or zero emission, zero output schools. So that may come along, it may not. I'm not going to talk about the budget. You've been hearing enough about the budget, I think. We are opposing the bill that would require the payment, the both payments each year, and when they would go up from 10 million up to 16 million mandated. Again, this is the program which is giving payment to private schools for kids to go, and our opinion, of course, has been that public funds should be invested in public schools. The student member bill is being heard on March 3rd, so that hasn't even had its hearing yet. And then getting to our favorites, the reportable offenses bills. Well, let's go back one. The bill that we talked about last month, I finally think I understand House Bill 84 a little bit. It really clarifies that those actions on school grounds that are willful disruptions are handled as crimes if they aren't the students. If they're student initiated, and they are excluded by this bill. If it's student initiated, then it becomes a student disciplinary matter and is handled within the student discipline protocols. So that is apparently moving along, and it really corrects something that was not clear in previous bills. Not that it was very clear in this bill either. Reportable offenses, the hearing was very interesting because the sponsor was doing it because he's now the vice chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and it was a bill that Delegate Atterbury had put in previously. She's now chairman of Ways and Means, so he was presenting two Ways and Means. And you would think that in all cases of reportable offenses, as the advocates for the bill talked, that in every case of reportable offense where a child where the school is notified of a child's arrest during the weekend or so, that the child was normally taken out of school, put in an alternative school. There were dramatic actions. And I just got your statistics, and in almost every case, your student, although you're glad to know what has happened, and you perhaps are taking action with that child or various ways, but they are not being removed from the school. There's no dramatic change in their life. They are kept in the classroom, and I was very grateful to get that information. There were some other people, well, our people testified in very well about the bill, about why it was such a bad bill. I mean, to change from notification of the school immediately to maybe notification of the school once the case has been adjudicated is a totally different kind of program. I mean, the program was intended to help the school maintain a safe environment and to handle a child. By knowing that they've been arrested, they may need even some special attention and so forth at that point. And if you wait until they've been adjudicated after weeks, maybe, that isn't going to do the school system any good. But people like Delegate Buckle were asking good questions. There's a lot of doubt, I think, about this bill. So I think that with enough input and case studies and so forth, we may be able to maintain the reportable offense structure similar to what it is now. And there is another bill, 828, a truancy reduction program, in which a circuit court judge can establish a training reduction program for kids that are coming through the juvenile court system, and can require certain things of the child that may keep them then from going on into the whole juvenile justice system. And it can require them to go to school, to do service work. It can require them to do certain counseling or all kinds of different things. So that's another positive kind of program that could happen. Delegate Parent's bill's been heard, but no action has been taken on that. I'm not going to talk about the SRO bill tonight because nothing has been moving on that. And so with that, I think I've gotten my saying in less than 15 minutes.
Wow.
Have I?
Be an opportunity for questions for Ardith tonight, if there are questions about things that are happening in Annapolis.
I'm going to be emailing you about the Bill 84, about the crimes on school property and stuff, because I have some questions about it, but I'm not going to take time tonight to do it, save
Okay.
time.
And I'm still not the expert on that bill.
No.
We might want to talk to John.
You know more than I do about it. You've seen the bill probably.
Oh, yes, I've.
I've just seen
and I've read-
excerpts.
Yeah.
Well, just on that bill, if I may. So as Ardith said, what it does is it eliminates students from the group of individuals who can be charged with essentially disruption of school operations. So visitors would still be able to be charged under that section of the law. For students, essentially what they wanted to do was remove students from being subject to that charge. But as Ardith said, they can still be brought under disciplinary action for their behaviors. And most of the crimes that would be committed are covered in a different section of the criminal code. So if the student does something that is so severe to necessitate criminal action against them, there are other parts of the criminal code that generally will cover those behaviors. So theft, things like that, they can still be charged under the criminal code. They just can't be charged under the education article of disrupting school
They still
operations.
have that list of 50 crimes. Remember a few years ago?
In the reportable offenses, no, the bill also narrows down the things which can be considered reportable offenses, and that's okay. I mean, there were some things in there that people thought were, might be a fist fight that shouldn't be considered a reportable offense. It's now pretty much the crimes of violence, having guns and setting fires and things like that. So that part of it, that part of the bill may be okay.
Any other questions for Mrs. Erstrom? Well, thank you so much for your report. We look forward to seeing you next month.
By then, there will be a lot happening, I'm
Sure.
sure.
We'll give you extra time.
I'm sure.
I'll get 20 minutes maybe then.
Thank you, Mrs. Erstrom.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the next report is the 2021-2022 Semester 1 Student Attendance Update with Dr. Willow.
Good evening again. I'm going to go through some attendance slides tonight that show us attendance over a 3-year period. The first slide that we're going to look at is elementary attendance. What you will see is a week-by-week comparison. So week 1 is the start of the school year. Week 21 is the 3rd week of January when the marking period came to an end of the first semester. There are 3 lines that are going to come in. In purple is the 2019-20 week-by-week attendance. The next line is green, and that is the 2021 attendance. And then what we're currently experiencing, the 21-22 attendance. And again, the percentages are on the left-hand side, and the bottom of the scale is the week by week. If we look at middle school, same setup. In first is the 19-20 attendance, the 20-21 attendance, and then the 21-22 attendance. There are some weeks where we dip low, and that's historical. For example, if you look at week 18, week 18 is the week before the holiday break. And so this is important to look at as we look at previous years. Sometimes things are different within the calendar committee, and we make decisions. Short weeks tend to be weeks where the attendance is lower, but what makes this one unique is that we had a 4-day week. And where we saw a dip was on the Thursday of that week, was a day that was much lower than the rest of the week. So we do look at these trends on a week by week to get a sense of where we're at. You'll see the same thing with high school when we look at, again, the 1920 data versus the 2021 data, and then versus the 21-22 data. And again, I point out that week 18, week 19 returning from the holiday break as 2 weeks that are concerning. But you also, if you went back, you would see the week of Thanksgiving in there is also another lower week. So that is not necessarily uncommon. So week by week is only one way that we look at attendance. We also need to then take, if we took all those weeks and we averaged them together, what would we see? So we look at cumulative attendance for that. So what you'll see are that there is elementary, middle, and high. The first graph that I'm bringing in is cumulative attendance. If I went back and I looked at 1920, I would see that elementary, again, at the halfway mark, 94.9, and you can go across and see middle and high school and see a total. If I go back and I look at last year's attendance, you would see a drop, and again, same concept, elementary, middle, and high, and total. And then this year's cumulative attendance. So in a lot of ways, when we look at cumulative attendance and we look by week, we are in a comparable situation to where we were last year. There's no hiding that. As we look at the scale, we see some weeks we're up, some weeks we're down. Cumulative, we're slightly ahead at elementary. We're a little bit further behind with middle and high school. We're not where we want to be yet, but there are a couple other attendance slides that I want to show, and then we'll talk about steps that we're taking to work with our community on correcting this. So the percentage of students chronically absent. So let's review quickly. Chronic absenteeism is defined as when a student misses more than 10% of the school year. This is a moving target because at day 90, 10% would be 9 days. So a student that's chronically absent in January may not be chronically absent in March. As the year goes on and more days are built in, it's at that 10% mark. Okay, and again, that's defined at the state level. So again, when we look at elementary, middle, and high, and we look at over where we're at over the past 3 years, that would be the mark of where we would be at by first semester. So again, we typically range anywhere from that 12%. High school tends to always be the highest. Here it's 17. Last year at the same time, where we were at, and then this year. A big component of our attendance this year is the chronic absenteeism. And then that is different than just looking at it on a week by week. So we're looking at students that are missing significant amounts of time that are influencing the overall attendance. So that's important that you're looking at it from that lens because it makes how you attack or how you work to improve attendance, your strategies. So let's talk about what we are doing. Tier 1 is still at our school level. School attendance committees, looking to create action steps, incentives, challenges. Those are the old PBIS systems that some of you may remember, perfect attendance awards, celebrations, recognition, that kind of stuff. Sometimes we see schools do a week-to-week challenge by grade levels or by departments, or by team levels. That stuff is still happening. We do use our Connect 5 system to send calls, emails, texts to parents when a student is absent, and we do still send the regular attendance letters. Tier 2 and Tier 3 are the things that we do for students that need additional support. So now we're looking more at that chronic absenteeism group. So what we talk about there are using our student support team, referrals to community agencies. A check-in, check-out program is very similar to having a mentor that checks in with the student in the morning to start the day, checks out with the student at the end of the day. Again, relationships matter when we're talking about attendance. And again, trying to create that positive relationship for every student to have at least one staff member that they can have that part of. And that's, again, part of the check-in, check-out process. We do home visits. And in certain cases, we do involve the court. There's probably a couple things that I'll end with here. One, there is no doubt that COVID has impacted our attendance. I mean, the data shows that. And to what we've heard earlier this evening, students that have to stay out through quarantine or through being exposed to COVID or testing positive for COVID has had an impact not only last year, but this year. That's certainly part of this. There's also part of this where I think it's working. Again, this isn't about going after groups of people, but it's working as a team, as a community, on how we improve attendance. We hear from our community partners in the business that a lot of times there's this mindset that I can miss work once every 2 weeks, or that if I make it up, it's okay, or if I go to school and I miss a day once every 2 weeks, as long as I make up the work, I'm okay. It's just not that simple. Yes, making up the work is significant, it's important, but you can't replicate the learning experience that's happening in a classroom by providing a worksheet. And so I think it's part of working to educate, not a blame game. This isn't a parent's fault, this isn't a teacher's fault, this isn't students, this isn't administrators. How do we move forward to improve attendance? Because it's going to take a community effort. Some of this, hopefully, we're quarantining far less students than we have had to at any point in time during this pandemic, so that's encouraging. But also part of this is working, again, as a partnership with our stakeholders to ensure that everybody understands the value of attendance. And when we have these situations where we see students that are struggling to consistently make it to school, having individual solutions for those students, because each one of these cases is unique. And I think that's the power of the SST team, the power of our administrators, our counselors, our PPWs working together to find a solution-oriented focus to help the child improve attendance, which ultimately will lead to us seeing more success on those academic goals that we want to see accomplished as well.
Any questions for Dr. Willow? Thank you, Dr. Willow.
Thank you, Dr. Willow. At this time, we'll have board member committee reports. Would you like to begin down there, Dr. Sedmire?
Curriculum and instruction will meet here February 28th at 1 o'clock, and we have a tight agenda.
Okay. Mr. Evans?
Nothing new at this time.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to say anything about the MAPE Legislative Committee?
Just that we're meeting, getting updates on numerous bills. A lot of bills in the General Assembly affecting education. And you heard me say before, you know, there's a lot of things we can't control what those legislators do, and we all know where the majority of them come from and everything else, so fingers crossed.
Mr. Bickford, policy?
Policy Committee next meets March 2nd in the Funkstown room, and it's at 2 o'clock.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray, HR? Mr. Gusa, anything regarding student government?
Yes, the Washington County Association of Student Councils General Assembly was rescheduled to be at February 24th, Thursday, 10 to 2 at South High, and I will get that on the calendar.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move now to miscellaneous business item, future agenda items. You should have a list for the March 1st and March 15th meetings. Quite a few recognitions on our March 1st meeting, and we will be hearing at that meeting from the Budget Advocacy and Review Committee, fondly known as the BARC, and they will be here to present their recommendations regarding the board fiscal year 2023 JAF General Fund operating budget. And then Dr. Willow, you'll be doing a blueprint update that evening. Look forward to that. Coming up on March 8th, we have a meeting downtown with the Board of county commissioners to do a budget presentation. And then the 15th, we'll have Mrs. Cade back and another discussion regarding our operating budget and more recognition and another blueprint update. So if you have any suggested agenda items, please let a member of the Agenda Planning Committee know so that we can get it on the agenda for an upcoming meeting. We'll move now to board member comments. Mr. Gupta, would you like to begin?
Sure. I just want to send my thanks to Dr. Michael. It was a surprise to me. I'm not sure. I definitely did not know until he announced it just not that long ago. And it's still kind of shocking me. And, you know, the first time I heard about you, I heard about through Kevin, and I couldn't believe the amount of work that you did. I remember talking about, oh, what about this, what about this, what about this, what about this? And he's like, oh, that's superintendent, that's superintendent, that's superintendent. And it was so much work. I could not imagine how you did it all. And Washington County is a great school system. I'm in awe sometimes of how much I didn't realize that goes on in this county. And I didn't realize until I became the student member on the Board of Education. And I just want to thank you for all the work that you do. And I wish you the best of luck.
I'm going to save my remarks about that later on in the year because you're still here.
That's right.
So I want to congratulate Tanish for being an AP Scholar with honor. And I also want to say that I was with Mr. Stauffer and Dr. Michael at the Tech High Eggs and Issues. And I also had a guest with me, and he was so impressed with Tech High. He just had no idea that we had so much going on in Washington County. And so I was happy to share that with him. And it was a wonderful event. They did a great job. So thank you. That's all for tonight.
Mr. Bickford?
I'll save my long comments for down the road because we have a long time to continue to sing your praises. But I will say that when I first joined the board and within 2 minutes of sitting down as a board member, our last superintendent resigned. I remember that the decision was very easy. We were sitting around talking to a potential person that was going to help us do a superintendent search, and I asked the question, what if we took a vote today and everybody wanted the same person? They said, then don't do a superintendent search. Why do it? And I think shortly after we chose you, and it's been it's been the best decision I've ever made on the board. And so I'll stop there, and we have lots of time to sing your praises. But I just you did surprise us all tonight. A very well kept secret. I think your family didn't even really know, except for close family, right? So
My wife knew.
your wife knew.
Everyone else found out just a few minutes ago.
Yeah, absolutely. We wish you had you for longer, but I totally understand that this job is exhausting, and your wife deserves a bit more of you. So.
I'll ditto what some of the things already been said. Tanish, congratulations on your AP Scholar with honors, I believe, I read, or was it with distinction?
With honor.
Okay. All right, congratulations on that. The robotics competition, that was South High. We went to that, and I was impressed. I was there about an hour walking around, and I loved the competition pits and everything. It's amazing what those kids are doing at various grade levels. Eggs and Issues was a great tour of Tech High School, seeing the automated factory, the artificial intelligence lab or classroom. Just amazing what's been going there. And that brings me back to Dr. Michael. I can recall, like Peter, Mr. Bickford did, we were on the board 1 week, and the former superintendent announced his intention to resign and so forth. I remember sitting in that meeting thinking, the decision's easy for me. We got a guy who's been in the wings for years. Decision's easy for me, Floyd Michael. And I will tell you this, I sat many years on what people call the union side. I don't call it that, it's an association, because you don't have to join, you can't strike. So it's an association. But I remember serving on committees with Boyd. One was the reorganization of 3 or 4 schools, and we met up there. And I'll save some other thoughts at a later time. But I remember sitting there, because I didn't know Dr. Michael Boyd that well, and I remember sitting there, and I kept thinking, I've seen him before, but he reminds me of somebody I've seen before. And I kept thinking there and thinking and thinking and thinking, and now I can't remember the guy's name, but he reminded me of the actor who played in the television show 24. Played the, who was it?
Kiefer Sutherland?
Yeah, played the secret agent. And finally I said that, and some of the other central office staff said, yeah, you think so too? That's what we tell him all the time. Anyhow.
Yeah, I'll say, I am a member of the Antietam Exchange Club, and we every week we get a guest speaker, and this week we had a couple of representatives from the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts, and a couple of students came and played their instruments and talked about the program. It really is an incredible program. Anyone that knows me knows that I do not listen to music. I listen to people talk all day. So even still, really appreciated the work they put in, and not only the students but also the staff there as well. So it's great. And I'll just end with Dr. Michael. We're almost at 7.5 hours of meetings today. You sure you want to give that up?
Thank you, Ms. Meadows. Dr. Detmeyer?
My daughter and son-in-law hosted a sheriff's debate last night, so I had my grandson all to myself. And he wanted to read the history of George Washington, which is a very, very long book. But appropriate since President's Day is Monday. As a side note, in 1755, General Braddock sailed up the Potomac to pick up his new recruit, Washington. And during the ensuing battles, Washington had 2 horses shot out from underneath of him, and 4 musket balls passed through his uniforms. But Providence prevailed. So the interesting sideline to this is when my granddaughter went to preschool, on this side of the Teddy Roosevelt Bridge is a manhole cover. If you go down 16 feet, you find Braddock's Rock, where he landed when he picked up George Washington. Now that's become, on old maps, the key of keys. It's the starting point. It's where every single thing in that mixed up city begins at that point. Old maps coordinate the entire system of the city on that rock. We all have a key of keys. It's how we know what we know, and it's truth with a capital T. And so, Dr. Michael, thank you for your service, for always, always, always allowing truth with a capital T to guide you, and may providence prevail, and you continue to prosper in all that you set your hand to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Detmeyer. I'd like to congratulate Tanish. Congratulations on your AP honors. And I'd like to say that Mr. Stauffer and I had the opportunity to attend a MABE Board Academy last week on the budget.
Yep.
And it was well done. It was done by a gentleman who is new to MABE, but worked for many years in Caroline County. And the session on the budget was so good that Stan and I talked, and we said we thought that if other board members had the opportunity to attend ever, and this is something that's repeated, it is well worth attending. It wasn't my first time there, and each time I attend, I learn something
It was
something
virtual.
new. It was virtual,
Yeah.
as the academies are this year, so it was a good one. I had a surprise today, and I respect your decision, as I've respected all the decisions that you've made as you've sat there in that chair these several years. And July 1st is a way away. There's lots of work to do.
There is.
I can't think of anyone in public education who deserves retirement and a good retirement more than you do. But I'm a little encouraged by a word I heard you say between our closed session and this one, and it started with the R word. So maybe, just maybe, you'll have a second win and think about rescinding your retirement. It's been known to happen. Denise is probably blessing me as she watches this, but
Cursing you, probably.
yeah, so there'll be much more to say come July 1st, Boyd, but we're just very, very fortunate to have you at the helm of Washington County Public Schools. So.
Thank you.
Okay, so if there's nothing further, did you want any parting words? No? All right, then we'll just call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.